Good, how are you? Good. Thanks for coming.
You just drive up. There are two participants on the call, including you. You are joining your conference as the host. For a menu of available plans, press star pound.
Good morning, Chief Roberts. Is that you on the phone?
Yes.
All right, great. We are just sitting down and getting started here in a second.
The host is going to send you a link
Okay.
that you can forward again.
And are you by a computer, Chief?
Yes, I am.
All right, I'm going to send you a link so that you can log in and you can follow along on the PowerPoint. It's a go-to meeting, so you should be able to see exactly what we're doing in the room as far as the PowerPoint goes.
Okay, great, thank you.
Yep, I'll get that to you right in a second. And I've gotten, I know Senator Przansky is on his way, so he'll be joining us too, hopefully pretty shortly. But in terms of quorum, we're good. We're good. So maybe while we're waiting for Senator Przansky, just for the chief on the phone, we can go around and let him know who's in the room. I'll start myself, Mike Schmidt, Criminal Justice Commission, to my left.
Madeline Dardos, Ann Lehman, CJC. Courtney Riggs, CJC. Kelly Officer, CJC.
Tim Moore, Multnomah County Sheriff's Office.
Tim Collingham, Hardy County District Attorney.
Kiki Park Rose, Klamath County Community Corrections.
Jackie Winter, State Senator.
Paul Eckert, CJC. Tiffany Quintero is here as well, just stepped out.
So one of the first orders of business is handing out the menus for lunch. So we're passing those around, and circle, write down your name on the top and circle what it is you want for lunch. And I'll make sure that it's here by noon.
You know what the soup of the day?
It's the soup du jour.
That sounds good.
That sounds great. I don't know.
It was minestrone on Tuesday.
Let's see. Chief, what's your email address? It's not popping up in my phone.
Okay, so it's my first name,
Yep.
SDUART dot ROBERTS at C as in Charles, I as in Ida, dot Pendleton dot OR dot US.
Got it. All right, I just sent it, so let me know if it doesn't show up in your inbox pretty quick.
Okay.
If we have anyone at the other building.
So we were standing by the street waiting for everyone to show up.
Senator, yeah.
Okay, but I told him to come around and walk back.
If you're interested in see Hawaii. I just started back on it. Just need to go ahead the pesto. My son said they were having to do so much for the tape, and then you've got the, in the old book, we produced stuff, so there's also pictures, captures, and that, so. Because there's pictures of his sister, which is Mark, pictures when he was 17. Were you at the meeting? I had another.
Maybe.
It talks to me.
Might give us a guess. Oh, yeah, it's, well, here, I'll
Transportation vision.
I actually don't know, my email's not up. So, I mean, yeah, I sent them that. I don't know why I really, I don't think I really took it. Okay. Is that top? Yeah, you can type that thing in. Yeah. Or you can go to this thing and do the meeting ID. Either way.
Oh, was it? I just had a Easter one.
We can just tell them those numbers.
I heard Eugene. But, isn't it Marion? I think that's what I heard. Because I talked to my people. And we actually started in it. It's the common policy that created that problem in Marion. So we have to.
So the other one we don't have is for Floyd, right?
My opinion.
It's like the annual cost, is that right?
There's not a guy from the board, I couldn't make that out, I said, Jennifer.
Remind me.
At least we pinpoint
Good.
the issue.
I was thinking about even having set up a student's desk. I was told they do procedures here, do probation, medications.
What's that out?
See if that's what the small issue is.
I don't know, so I think I have to do it through it.
He's upstairs. No, it's downstairs. Oh, let's wait for those.
Did you get a sense of them? Get to them out. Chief, we just sent you another email with the link for you to click on. We had to change the link.
Everybody, the collaboration system. I'm glad you did.
If anyone needs a cup of water,
Where's your coffee?
coffee?
Where's your tea? Where's your cocoa?
I think we can bring you a
I
cup
mean,
of coffee.
it's cold outside. Haven't you forgot some? Maybe it's cold outside.
We can brew coffee. If anyone wants a cup of coffee. All right. Chief, have you been able to get to the link?
Yeah, it's just in the process now.
Okay.
He's a runner up there.
Oh, yeah, okay, it just shows that you showed up. Perfect. Well, I think we'll get started. Senator Brzezinski's on his way, so he probably got detained somewhere. He'll be joining us, but I'm sure he wouldn't mind if we got going. As we do have a quorum, and Chief Roberts on the phone, means that we have enough voting members. The only thing I want to say to the preamble of this is just thanks to my staff here and the hard work, and you guys have probably already seen it as you read through these. These county applications that have come into us, a lot of them have taken a lot of back and forth and talking with them, and our staff anticipating what your questions might be and trying to make sure that the information is there for you to make the best decisions. So each of them, and you'll see this as we go through as the specific person presents on their counties, they've had lots of conversations with the counties. So if you have a question about something that maybe you didn't see, ask them, because maybe they've actually had that dialogue and can answer that for you. But they've just done an incredible amount of work to put this all together and hopefully make this process as streamlined as possible. So I just want to recognize that effort. And with that, Senator Winters, you can be our de facto chair for the day. But I think until we get to the voting portion of things, I'll turn it over to Paul.
So we maintained this slide in which Mike covered in some detail the first time we met. So this is just a reminder of what our utilization looks like statewide. 2 days ago at the convening of counties, there was a lot of detail about the current state that we won't dive into right now, but you'll see from a regional perspective this show up again throughout the slides. So we covered this last time we were here. There's 2 parts to these. I think everyone understands that. The victim panel met on Monday to review the part 2s on these. And we don't have their approval in all cases. So we'll share some updates that came out of that meeting with you in kind of the current state. And we'll just couch those as staff recommendations at this point, where we don't have approval. So the final deadline for all applications is October 14th. We reviewed them between the 22nd and the 5th to prepare for the victim panel on Monday and today's event. In keeping with what we did last time, like Mike said, there were things we went and sought clarification around. We'll present the recommendations for each county there, and all of the counties remitted the 3% with the exception of Multnomah. So we'll have a discussion about what they want to do with their 3% as part of today's presentation. Some of this we went over last time, but just a reminder that the application in total needs to meet all 4 of the goals of justice reinvestment. But in particular, parts in the Program 1 narrative only have to link to 1 goal. So you might see a proposal that only links to accountability or only to recidivism. But the application in total needs to link to all the goals. We've divided up the presenting amongst the 3 grant analysts again, and we've got 21 to go over. We'll do that with each one. We'll go in alphabetical order. That's agreeable. Mike's probably going to get Ben.
Yeah.
6 applications needed some rehabilitation from our standpoint. Rehabilitation doesn't constitute us just getting more clarification. It's when there's actually something that would hold us up recommending it going forward. So we did a lot of work with Tillamook's proposal. They had several parts to it that we really saw as kind of one overriding part, and in conversation with them, they easily could see that, how that would fit, so they made some modifications to it. And then they had a Part 2 chaplain program that on further review, they withdrew that from their Part 2 proposal. CLATSUP had a Part 1 narrative, a law enforcement software that would track, essentially help them in investigations of crimes. And so they actually withdrew that before the review was complete. Walau's original victim proposal would not have gotten approval by the victim panel. They looked at it and would not have approved it. It was to a local ministry, and it wasn't clearly delineated on how victim services were at the core of those services, and even some of their approach in their narrative was seen as harmful and not best practice. So they would not get approval, and upon getting that feedback, the county really didn't want to stand behind that proposal. In fact, they really wavered on whether they would propose anything at all. And so we gave them another timeline to submit an alternative proposal, and they have not acted on it. So we have no proposal out of all the counties for a 10% piece here. My thinking is that if that money's still appropriated here to us, perhaps they'll come to some kind of idea or notion on what a proposal could be in the future, and maybe we'll see something from them, but we don't know. We don't know. Right now, we don't have a proposal.
Do they have a victims advocacy group there?
They do. They have a couple of options. Kind of the option that the expert panel was expecting to see. There's a lack of confidence and belief that the money should go there from the local grant writer, and so we don't know all the particulars there, but there's some problems that were keeping them from wanting to give them the money. So we talked about some other options. They just haven't acted on those other options. So I don't know that they will at this point. Deschutes had a CASA proposal as part of a 3-part victim proposal, and that needed some modifications before it was targeted on the criteria for the 10%. So they did that work, it's back in. And then Wheeler and Gillum counties both needed to modify their victim proposals, and so we worked with them and have updated information today. So we're looking at $33,892,000 in terms of program funding. It looks higher than what I thought it'd be, but and we've got that broken down by the 10% and the 3%. So we'll start with Baker County, and oh, here's some agendas. The agenda's made it around. So Baker County is Madeline Dardos, and we'll start with Madeline and work through each of the counties alphabetically.
So Baker County is getting a little over $180,000. Their victim 10% is a little over $18,000, and they are remitting at 3% back to the CJC for evaluation. On the next slide, you'll see there's prison usage. Maybe one more time.
Sorry about that.
Yeah. Prison usage on the left, which is relatively low. For their first program, they're expanding on existing services. So they are partnering with New Directions Behavior, Health, and Wellness to add 2 MRT groups in the local jail and 2 in the parole and probation office to serve in the community. Currently, they only have 2 groups in the jail, 1 male and 1 female, so this is going to add an additional 4 extra groups. Their goal is to reduce the gaps in service as folks move from incarceration to community supervision, and to make sure that offenders are, that they move right into treatment or they're able to continue with treatment. Some of their stated goals also that 90% of their incarcerated offenders will engage in treatment during incarceration in their local facilities, and then also that 95% of those under community supervision released from their county jail will continue to engage in treatment within their community. So their second program is actually, it's bringing back a previously canceled program. They had a work crew about 6 years ago, funds dried up for that, and so now they're looking at hiring, using Justice Reinvestment funds for a part-time weekend position to do work crews on the weekend. They have the equipment needed, they just need the personnel for this program, and they are, this will actually allow for 7-day reporting within the county, where they used to have 5 days, and will provide an additional community sanction option for their officers. And then 10% is going to May Day, who serves victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, and elder abuse, and it's going to add a new position. It's going to help support a half-time victim advocate to assist with programming and outreach. And CJC staff recommends approval, and the victims 10% panel recommends approval as well.
Any questions about Baker? The committee on your hand? Okay. We're going to skip Benton and come back to it. So we'll go to Clackamas.
Okay, so Clackamas is getting just short of $2.5 million for their formula request. So that is $248,000 for their victims program, and then they're remitting their 3% back to the CJC. And you can see right there, they're lower for the metro region, and just above their threshold amount in prison usage. And so they are continuing a program that was originally started with last biennium Justice Reinvestment Funds. It's a transition center focused on, they serve offenders other than just short-term trans leave, but that's also a strong focus of their program. They provide services to individuals who are releasing from the local jail, from DOC, community corrections, and also those that are just in their community and at risk of reoffending, with a focus on medium and high-risk offenders and those on short-term trans leave. So with their Justice Reinvestment Funds, they're hoping to basically expand sort of a larger population with additional services, and also continue to strengthen their community partnerships and build upon pre-release planning. So just for example, some of the services that they provide in the transition center include medical personnel, treatment, mental health services, peer mentors, employment assistant, housing, and GED programs. Their goal is to accept 98% or more of all of their short-term trans leave referrals. And They also are asking for funds for a data analysis, data analyst to develop a database so that they can track client information and then also report out on program outcomes. So then their second program is also expanding upon an existing program. It's an intense residential treatment program that targets medium and high-risk clients on felony supervision with high treatment needs as well. They offer gender-specific programming. It's both male and female. And the funds will go toward an additional 4 treatment beds in each program, so that will bring them to a total of 32 male and 24 female. They mentioned in their application that they have a particular need for a particular rise in clients who are addicted to heroin, and these beds will help fill that need. And so then their 10% is actually 3 programs that are all kind of partnering around a Safe Place Family Justice Center. And so the top 2, the Clackamas Women's Services and the Children's Center, one will support a advocate for CWS and then also a medical examiner for CC. And then they partner with Los Niños as a kind of a culturally specific provider that also works within the Safe Place Family Justice Center. And this will help support a volunteer coordinator position that they're in danger of losing due to decreasing funds that will assist in co-management at the Family Justice Center, but also work with community partners through Los Niños. And CJC staff recommends approval, and the 10% victims recommends approval on the victims piece.
Any questions, concerns, Clackamas? Okay.
So Senator Brzezinski just got here. We can just pause for
Yeah,
a
we
second.
can.
I'll let him get to. So,
And Ben was grabbing some notes off his desk, so since we may go back to Ben if all times are up.
Could you tell from your description, was Clackamas County doing some pre-booking diversion?
That was not something that they focused on in their application. They were primarily.
I just thought some language in there that was off, didn't match anything that matched. So it's got to be multiple funding streams.
For the transition
For the
center?
transition center, okay.
is everything working good for Chief Roberts on the phone?
Yeah.
Great.
Oh, not yet. I put it in here, but it disappeared.
Ben, are you ready to go on Benton?
I am. As fast as I can write chicken on here.
I see it spelled CHIXN on football programs sometimes. And I should eat more.
I'm gonna have to look on myself on this. All right, so Benton County, the request is for 413. The total funding request, that includes the program funding of 370 and 10% of 42, 3% that they are removing to CJC, and they reach their total funding amount. Benton is one of the counties. Their first program, their transition program, increases the transition team's capacity to provide housing to inmates being released from the Department of Corrections by way of short-term trans leave and alternative incarceration programs. And basically, their transition team identifies eligible candidates, conducts reach-ins about 180 days in advance, and prepares releasing inmates. The second piece is the community-based programs. These are the personnel costs associated with the delivery of evidence-based curriculum by a trained parole and probation officer. And these funds help support Benton County's already existing drug court, or adult drug court. So that's their 3 main programs. And for the victims, 10%, you've got the Center Against Rape and Domestic Violence. Even split between all 3 for the 42,000. Court-appointed special advocates, CASA. I don't know if Paul, if you need me to go into detail on that. And then ABC House, which does medical exams, forensic interviews, trauma counseling, family support to child victims of abuse and their families. After careful review, staff recommends approval of the program fees, and the victims panel recommends approval of the victims 10%.
Any questions?
What was the curriculum?
That is a great question. Okay. So, actually don't have.
Thinking for change and motivation goal.
Is it provided?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you for changing motivation. Thanks, Ann.
Okay, so we're good on that. We just took care of Clackamas, so let's go ahead here to Clatsop.
So Clatsop County, they just have the one program, what Paul mentioned, right when we first got here, they pulled out the Celebrate and took that 14,900 and combined it into the reduced probation caseload program. As you can see, sorry.
If you want to go back.
Yeah, sorry about that. As you can see, they're green and they're actually have been doing well. They're trending down in their intakes, so good. The reduced probation caseload is going to help them with more effective interventions. Right now, currently without this additional probation officer, they have a 66-to-1 ratio, and this will bring them down to about 50-to-1. This specific probation officer will be the treatment-oriented intensive supervision caseload, so it will be a focused caseload that they'll have. Additionally, they will be funding with this money 0.5 FTE case aid. It will help with the wraparound services, and that includes housing, treatment, making sure that these folks get to the place that they need to be, so coordinating transportation, things like that, making sure that the services that they are receiving are the ones that are based on their risk of needs assessment. And then they will also be funding some of those wraparound services. So it's a big chunk of money, but it's definitely not all going to the parole and probation officer. It's going to build the program as a whole. For victims, 10% is going to the harbor. It also incorporates within the harbor is the Lighthouse for Kids, which is the children's advocate that specializes in the sexual violence and domestic violence assistance, and then as well as the Victory Over Child Abuse Camp. So they'll be funding a camp for that as well. And staff recommends approval as well as the Victims Advisory Panel approval.
Any questions, concerns? Any Clatsop? Okay, so we'll move on to Columbia.
Columbia is, they're just funding one program as well. You can see the program funding for that is $372,985, and then victims. They're up, and the program that they are working on, it's hopeful that that will bring that down. So they labeled it the Columbia County Justice Reinvestment Program, but it is essentially the evidence-based decision-making EPDM program, where they're going to look at their entire criminal justice system and figure out all of the decision points that offenders and probationers and everybody faces, from the point of the first contact all the way through the end, and try to figure out how they can improve all of those contacts and how to best make their system as well as it can be. They've reached out to me for some help on doing their system mapping, and sounds like at the convening on Tuesday, they also spoke with Paul about potentially maybe getting some federal help with the specialists that do this all the time, that are much more trained than I would ever be. So They're certainly looking at first doing the system mapping and then kind of going through each of the steps with EBDM at a pace that they can manage.
I'm going to set up a conversation with them and the National Institute of Corrections, who's sponsoring that particular project. I don't know if any money will be forthcoming, but at least the conversation will be started.
And I'm assuming that conversations were held with those that are up as to what's going on if they're up.
Well, we had the statewide conversation Tuesday, but each of us in the grant program will have those individual and ongoing conversations about the impact of these investments.
We talked about this on the RIC meetings as well.
Yeah.
Kind of by region, because we've always got people from all the different counties there, so it comes up at that point as well.
Thanks, Ross.
And we also had most of these counties, if they had not already addressed why, not necessarily why they were up, but the effect that these monies will have with their DAs and downward departures and things like that. We asked those questions, and if we don't make a comment about it, you can assume that these programs will increase their willingness to do additional downward departures. And I think there was actually very few this round that said, no, we're not going to do that. So they are cooperating and looking at more downward departures, more diversions, things like that. So the 10% victims is split evenly between the Amani Center and Safe of Columbia. The Amani Center is primarily the Children's Advocate in St. Helens, in Columbia County. It's located in St. Helens. And Safe of Columbia, they're going to, with those $21,000, put a lot into the housing program they have to support housing for these victims. And staff recommended approval as well as the advisory.
Any questions, concerns about Columbia? Okay. There's a delay in the click. The shoots.
So the shoot was receiving a little bit over 1.7 million, and that was 174,000 in the reciprocate program. They are the highest user prison in their particular region, and they're just a little bit above their threshold, you can see there. So they are focusing, their two programs, the first, they're focusing on a kind of a post-release program and then also a pre-sentencing. This first program is their short-term translate program that is a specialized caseload for alternative incarceration program offenders, short-term transit offenders, and then it will also be for their downward departure program. They currently have one PO that's serving all three of these offender groups. They want to expand that to 3 so that they can move to 100 to 130 offenders in both programs. So programming will include, so it's a specialized caseload, intensive supervision, and then also cognitive behavioral therapy. They're going to expand, be able to do weekend drug and alcohol testing. They previously weren't able to do that. And then also provide housing and a balanced sanction service model with the goal of high frequency of contact with offenders. They'll be contracting with the Bethlehem Inn to provide 5 beds. Those 5 beds are for this program as well as the pre-sentence one that we'll see coming up next. And then their goals are pretty clear. They want to maximize the number of eligible STTL and AIP offenders if they approve their applications. And then they also want to minimize those if they accept their return to prison for lack of compliance. So then this is the pre-sentencing. It's a 6-month front-end diversion program. So whereas the short-term translate program was building upon an existing program that they began with previous bienniums, $31.94. This is a new program that was implemented on October 1st. So it's a 6-month front-end diversion program for eligible drug and property offenders who it's been determined that they could be safely supervised in the community rather than prison. It begins with a pre-sentence assessment with the PPO does to help target what offenders would be appropriate. And then that moves to the DA's office, and the DA then does an initial determination about whether there needs to be more assessment on this individual and whether they can be referred for their justice reinvestment program. This program stresses strong collaboration between the DA and parole probation so that the parole probation can provide as much information as possible regarding the risk needs of the individual and then also their likely responsibility to parole rather than prison. So once if the offender is recommended and accepted into the downward departure program, then they are placed on, again, on that same specialized caseload, and they give access to those same services, and they're intensely supervised for 180 days. And if you look at their budget, this program, it's the same 3 officers that are going to serve both SCTL, AIP, and downright departure offenders, and they're going to share that same, those same continuum of services. And for their 10%, they are splitting it in between the Kids Center, which does medical exams, forensic reviews, and support advocacy for victims of child abuse. Mary's Place, which provides supervised visitation and then also a safe exchange for families that have experienced domestic violence and are still kind of doing a co-parenting model, or if the offending parent gets visitation time. And then also CASA. So this is the one that we did, that they've made some adjustments to make sure that they're fitting within the criteria of the victim's 10%. And they'll basically be expanding the existing services they have, where they recruit trained volunteers to provide advocacy for abuse and financial in the course of them. And CJC staff recommends approval, and this 10% victims recommend approval.
So our slide isn't completely up to date on this because we just got information in late here. So it doesn't actually have the approval of the victim panel, but it does have staff recommendation that it be approved. The reason it doesn't is because they were continuing to work and modify their narrative after the victim panel convened. And so the victim panel hasn't had a chance to look at that final product. It is in line with Benton County's CASA approved project. So that actually should just be that there were changes requested. My fault, it didn't get updated, but staff is recommending that that be approved.
Can we go back to the last slide?
Yes.
About Mary's Place. Do we know more about, I mean, are they just exclusively providing the service just for this population, or does Mary's Place also service other kids, or I'm just trying to...
So Mary's Place is they're actually a subset of another organization that serves victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and so they provide kind of a more specialized, they're the only organization within the county that actually works with offenders and victims and children who witness domestic violence or experience domestic violence. And so they kind of have a little, basically it's a niche within a larger advocacy network for victims of domestic violence in their families.
And so they work side by side with the Kids Center, I'm assuming.
They work with, yes, okay.
It looks, I mean...
And it's Saving Grace, which is the comprehensive organization.
Okay. With Wayne County, I don't know how hard it's set up for Kids First, and they seem to have both of those built in where they're working, not necessarily supervised visitation, but they are working with the victims' families to help them understand and provide for the child as well. So I'll just kind of see if they have to separate those out.
To Paul's point on this, I think it's important for this committee to have a little bit more context on the CASA part of their application, because there was an article written in the Benton Bulletin this past weekend, Sunday, saying that the Criminal Justice Commission would not support the CASA of the shoots, and it was the article itself was a little convoluted, but just in case, and I think it's important for you to understand what is coming out of that. So when we first got their application for this part of it, the CASA portion wrote that all children in foster care are victims. And our pushback to that was like, you know, in the broad sense that we can understand that, but this money is specifically supposed to go to victims of crime. And so that was our pushback to them. And so we worked with them multiple times, worked with their lipstick to work with the CASA and say, hey, how do your services, because we know that some of their services go to victims of crime, for sure. How are you targeting this? A lot like what Benton County did, right? And they really weren't willing to kind of change their application. They just said, you know, all these children are victims, and there's neglect, and there's abuse, and of course those are specific crimes. But we said, you know, we still need to narrow it. So at the time of that article being written, our staff they weren't willing to modify their application anyway, and so we were telling them, look, we are subject to statutory and constitutional definitions of victim, and it means victim of crime, and so we need to know that that's what this is targeted for. the article came out and made it seem as if the CJC didn't think that the work that CASA was doing was worth funding, or, you know, I mean, it had negative connotations. Multiple people in Deschutes County after that reached out to us. Representative Gene Wisnett reached out to us and other people and said, please work with the CASA so that they can write their application in a way that would meet the requirements of this funding. So we did that again for third or fourth or fifth time. And as of last night, they got it back to us rewritten with essentially pretty much what Benton County wrote, how they're going to use this money for the children who are victims of crime. So as staff, we felt that that meant the requirements of the law. And so then that's why Paul, when he says the victims panel didn't weigh in on this as his staff, that's because the victims panel met on Tuesday. And at that time, Deschutes County LIPSIC had actually voted to just extract the CASA portion of their application out of there and fund only Mary's Place and Kids Center. So our victims expert panel had voted on the Kids Center and Mary's Place, and they said those are great programs, we endorse that. They had not actually looked at the CASA portion of this. However, they did look at the Benton County CASA application, which they endorsed and supported. So we also have, you know, we feel like if they would have seen this, what we got last night, they would be in support of it. But officially, they have not had a chance to weigh on this part.
So what type of oversight will we have for those programs just to ensure they actually are following what we are required to follow by law?
Yeah, it's a great question. Paul?
Yeah, it makes a monitoring and a focus issue for us, right? So in the case of all the victims part and as well as the program narratives, we will have some kind of high-level expenditure tracking that they'll basically say, here's how we're spending our money. And there will need to be links between what they propose to do. So it'll be essentially on Madison and my shoulders to make sure that based on their current write-up as of last night, that's where their money goes and it targets it. And they'll have to show that in their quarterly reporting to us.
I think the last follow-up to that is, it seems to me with the cost of programs in general, maybe we want to ensure with some type of letter that it's been approved, but please realize that it's focused and needs to stay focused as presented. So Jackie in Ways and Means and such.
I would concur, because that's one that we've had, it's been very volatile, to say the least. And so I do think we have the ability to follow up and determine just what the dollars are being.
And it needs to be uniform across
Right.
for all of them, so they don't think we're picking on them.
Right. Yes, that's a good idea. We'll draft a letter that just really spells out victims of crime. And they know that we'll be following up on that so we can track that specific expenditure.
And then the last thing on the bid bulletin, was that an article or was it an editorial?
It was an article.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Would you be in a position to look at kids that are removed from the home because of drugs? Would those kids then qualify in there as victims?
A lot of times, and Tim could probably talk this better than I can, but a lot of times it's my understanding that a child is found in a home where there's a lot of open drugs and paraphernalia present, that they could be looking at an abuse and neglect case, which would then, of course, make them a victim of crime.
Endangering.
Endangering, yeah.
But what if there's not new charges filed? Would DHS goes in and takes custody of those kids?
I think that happens a lot more frequently. I think it just becomes a dependency case, and a lot of times, unfortunately, you don't get enough investigation, at least when I worked in juvenile, to charge those cases, but they do result in dependency cases.
Like most of this victims funding that we're doing, we're not requiring that there are charges filed to prove that you are a victim of crime. I mean, in all of these things, especially, you know, to breaking down barriers to victims of domestic violence who are accessing these services, we're not requiring that there are filed charges. So, I mean, I think it's a good faith, you know, that they are looking at children who could be subject to having that type of case where they'd be victims of crime.
I would CASA to a the kids that I had were just that they were kids that were in the home where there was a lot more than just drugs going on, but no charges were ever filed. And so, but I see them as victims of crime.
I think that's part of what the disconnect with Costa was, is that they felt like that was enough. They just needed to say, you know, these kids have had all these things happen, but we said, well, we really need you to kind of walk us through the steps and link this up a little bit better. And for a while, at least they weren't willing to do that, and eventually they did.
Gillum County.
Yes, Gillum.
According to Gillum, people in Gillum.
Gillum, so we're gonna go with it. So, Gillum County, formula amount, 100,000, so this is one of our minimums here.
Want to go back to
Yeah.
that?
No, that's okay, I'll just read what you can
You
see.
can barely see the person.
So if you can see, I even have that little note on here somebody wrote, if you can see it, it's great.
It's a good wedding
It's
dance.
great. They're
I
down.
don't see it. That long color.
It is there, it is there. So with program number one, actually this is their only program, they're running a full-time clinician. And this position seeks to improve quality of services offered to offenders in Gillum County through collaborative assessment and case planning. Just to say a little bit more about that, the PO and the clinician through this are going to be doing the risk need assessment jointly, which I thought was a pretty interesting little side note. These funds will also provide increased reach and capacity for inmates incarcerated in North Fork, and will provide education to criminal justice agencies, and will collaborate. This position will collaborate with Gillum County Sheriff's Office on pre-book and diversion options. So, another thing to know, it's a two-way street for education. I thought this was worth noting as well. The clinician's not only going to be trained in risk assessment, but they're going to end up working with offenders, but they're also going to help train other stakeholders and agencies in clinical stuff. So, we're a two-way street there. And they'll also provide some mental health and A&D services to those that are lodged in North Fork. The funds, like I said, fund full-time clinician, training for the clinician, and for a small piece of the psychiatrist. And anticipating that there could be a question about what curriculum or what model they're choosing, they are still in the process of choosing that. So they have not selected one yet. However, one thing to know when saying that, they do have a basic quality assurance plan put together. So I think whatever thing that they plug in there, they do have what I think is the foundation for being able to do quality assurance and maintain fidelity to whatever model they do choose. The basic structure. The 10%. So there's been a lot going on with the 10%, so we can help fill people in. The $10,000 originally was going to go to a school counseling position, and okay, I want to make sure I'm getting all done. So it was going to join a pot of another $71,860 to help on that position. So you want to update on the conversation?
So basically, CJC staff went back to the county and said, we really don't think that this is, again, serving specifically victims of crime as its primary function. They submitted another proposal that would go through Community Counseling Solutions, the same organization, but this time it would be focused in the community, serving victims, specifically serving victims of crime, so helping out with maybe a restraining order, finding housing, more of the services that we were looking for, but also, potentially doing the reach into schools to students who may be, who may be victims of crime, providing outreach and services there. We had a couple of questions from the victims panel about Community Counseling Solutions and whether or not, how core to their mission serving victims is, and whether they have the training and expertise to be able to provide those services. We went back to Gillum County, and you'll also see this, the same organization, these questions come up with Sherman and Wheeler as well. And what we found was that Gillum County has strong local partnerships with CCS. They are the mental health provider. The county felt that that though there may be other, like there's a domestic violence organization that also serves the county, they really felt like they were getting more localized. They were the primary priority of CCS, rather than they may be a secondary priority if they were to shift those funds elsewhere. So they're getting really strong localized services. They're building upon existing partnerships, and that they feel like CCS is currently doing and providing these services within their community, and they're doing it well. We got a little bit more information around the training that these folks have, their credentials, and I guess that brought CJC staff to be able to say, we do recommend this portion for approval. We just got this information within the past day or so and got it out to our victims panel. We have not, as of now, heard back from our victims panel on this. So that, they have not put their stamp of approval on it, but given the new information about the program, CDC staff did feel comfortable moving forward with it.
Yeah, the domestic violence services advocate is located in the Dalles. And this county doesn't feel like, and that entity is called Haven, this county doesn't feel like they're a priority to Haven, essentially. So the victim panel had concerns. We talked to the county. Staff doesn't have concerns as a result of that conversation. So although it doesn't have the approval of the victim panel for Monday, we're recommending to staff that this move forward and be funded. I've talked to the judge in the county. We've talked to the sheriff. We've got a sense that locally that's what they do with victims anyway at CCS. So they want to continue that. And they coordinate with Haven when necessary. It's really tough for these small counties. It's very, very hard. That's what I recognize. And even though like CCS covers several counties, you know, so much just comes down to relationships and who they're comfortable with, who they're working with. So.
That's exactly what we found.
In general, the 3 counties that we're going to be talking about with a similar story are all less than 2,000 people. So yeah, when we look at the lives, absolutely every time. So that's the only thing we do.
Okay, any questions, anything else there? Thank you for proving that. This is Harney.
I do.
You do, okay.
All right, so Hardy is getting $145,000, little $146,000, and $14,597 to the 15%. You can see low prison usage. They're a little in the red.
We just talked to the VA from that county.
Who can comment on it? Must be the That's what we heard.
And so Hardy County is proposing 2 programs. The first one is a new program. They identified in their application that a lack of housing has prevented the acceptance of 3 eligible short-term transit offenders recently. They're currently their only option are hotels. One of their hotels has said, you know, we no longer want to partner with you all, and the other, I believe 1 or 2 are either prohibitively expensive or they will accept sex offenders. So they're really kind of in a bind here around transitional housing.
They don't give us a government rate?
The government doesn't get a government rate.
I assume that.
And we know this is the government rates and they charge higher than the regular rates.
Oh, no.
Check it out.
They've identified a property within their community, and the funds will go to purchasing and furnishing this residential property for both male and female offenders. They look at an estimated 8 beds, because they haven't settled completely on the property. That is an estimate. But they are pursuing a duplex. It's a couple of blocks from community corrections, the sheriff's office, the treatment provider, and the courthouse. So it's very well situated within the community. Community corrections will monitor the home, and offenders are expected to participate in a work crew or volunteer if they are if they're in the housing. And then outside of the purchase and the furnishing of the home, the funds will also go toward an initial grocery allowance for offenders. Okay, so the second program is a new program as well. Hardy County is in the process of developing a re-entry court with many of the same folks that are also involved in their drug court. The re-entry court will serve offenders who were released from prison or who also have violated their terms of supervision. The team for the re-entry court consists of a judge, the DA, defense attorney, parole and probation officer, law enforcement, coordinator, and a treatment provider. And they expect the court to be able to accept their first referrals in spring of 2016. So this is still in the development process, and we'll see referrals for a couple of months. And the funds here are going to help support 2 personnel positions. They will be seeking out other grant funds to kind of shore that up, but Justice Reinvestment funds will go to support 2 staff salaries.
Our first re-entry court, Justice Reinvestment right here.
And the victims 10% goes to Hardy Hope. They serve victims of domestic violence, sexual assault, and stalking, and they want to be able to provide for 3 employees and about 100 hours over 2 years to be able to travel and provide support groups, coordinate emergency housing and food, clothing, transportation across their region for victims. And CGC staff recommends approval, and then a 10%
questions, concerns with Harney?
It almost seems artificial to have Tim sitting here and not weigh in on, have us explain it to you. This is what.
Now I think we have everything.
Now we get it.
I was gonna say, did we get it?
That way.
Okay. Thank you. Hood River?
Okay, so Hood River is getting about $184,000 with a little over 18,100 victims. You can see it's pretty low prison usage here.
There's a delay here.
We might need technical assistance.
They are slightly above the threshold. I don't know.
Work now. Oh.
Alex?
Turner, right?
Something happened, it wouldn't click forward anymore.
That's later.
We are. That's Jefferson, we're at Hood River.
Right.
We're at Goody.
Snohomish County is the second. Okay.
So it's stuff called can't go anywhere from there.
That's even that's actually. Yeah. See, it works. I'm gonna sit here.
Probation office is right here, it's small, so just come back across the street there.
The down arrow. It's 964, right?
Yeah, 64. That's his
It
presentation.
just doesn't like Hood River.
Sorry, Hood River, you
It
didn't get
didn't make
approved.
applesauce.
It's like.
And we could just go to the Jefferson side and then you can just go to the left.
It's almost too easy to come up with.
I don't know.
I feel like everybody else is. It's really easy.
We can make a circle with our mind.
Oh, goodness.
Well, if anyone needs to use the restroom, that'd probably be a great time, or refill on water, or does anyone need a cup? Can I get you a cup so you can get some water? That would be good.
I keep saying, where's
You want some coffee?
hot chocolate?
I'll get you some
No,
coffee.
I'm gonna be hard to deal with.
I should have gotten some hot chocolate, you're right.
I'm sure it was a cold drive. Up, wasn't it, Chloe? How was the traffic going?
Excellent.
Do you think we need to end the presentation and log that back in?
Maybe.
All congested is from here up.
He's just sitting down here.
Oh, yeah, it's been working the whole time, he was just sitting down, he didn't touch anything.
Yeah. I'm working with Betsy and
I was thinking maybe this was the,
and because Francis is on the financial position.
and he wasn't even using the mouse at all. Oh, that was the one.
Well, I just went to the first meeting on Tuesday.
Yeah, what was this, what's this one here?
And the three of us had met earlier on some regional solutions, we're all having the same issue. And that is like getting commodities, transport. And I think the three of us is kind of talking about that.
I don't know. That's weird. Yeah, when I double click, it's giving me the options.
Alex, if I have that open in real, that doesn't cause any problems, does it?
If what?
It's open in real, like, desktop, that doesn't matter, does
It should. I don't know why it would work for 64 slides and then stop working. That's fun. I got my shortcuts don't work either. Where did I restart? Sorry. Every once in a while. The right slide. Yep, that's the right slide. One more. Great. He's in. Go the other way. Go back on track. All right, we're back.
Makes sense.
Good break. I don't understand what happened.
Thanks for that.
Go up a slide.
We were so hard for this one. There it
is.
All right, the low usage. So we can go to the next one. So we got that. So, Hood River has 4 programs. The first one is a new program that you will also see again when we get to Wasco. They are kind of pooling Justice Reinvestment funds to do a reentry program in North War. So this is a reentry program focused on medium and high-risk offenders. They identify that they're seeing a lot of cycling, an increasing number of repeat offenders, specifically parole and probation violators and those that are suffering from mental illness or dealing with a substance abuse issue. The program has 3 phases. It's based on programs that I believe Georgia includes. There's about 5 different states, including Georgia and Alaska, who use the same model, 3-phase model. The first one is screening and assessment. So when the individual comes into the facility, they're screened at negative risk needs assessment, and then they're referred to services. The second phase is they're getting engaged in those services. They're probably not completing them due to their length of stay. And then they're also beginning release planning. And then in the third phase, they are released back into the community. They're under community supervision and continuing those services in the community and continuing along with that treatment plan that they had previously, or excuse me, the release plan that they had previously developed. So the programming involved in this includes substance abuse treatment, cognitive behavioral therapy, anger management, parenting, job classes, job readiness classes, and then also reentry focused classes. So their goal primarily is to just get offenders engaged while they have them in custody, set them up for release, and then be able to, for them to be able to continue programming once they've been released back into the community. And their goal is to provide 60% of their medium and high-risk offenders with access to programming.
And clarification on Norcor, I know there's a multiple county facility. So, and I know we've set it up where each county can use the money how they need it best. So Hood River is going to start or have this reentry program. I assume like thinking Yellow was also a part of Norcor.
It is part of Norcor, but Wasco is the one that wants to use the same program.
Right. Or the other county, I mean, it looks to me like a great way to get started, but it seems at some point it'd be great to have all the counties that are part of that facility
Tap in.
to tap in to have that reentry. So that's maybe something for us to be looking at in the future.
I think that all the tri-counties, so Gillum and Wheeler and Sherman, their folks go to Wasco for their jail, so they will have access to Norcor through that.
They will, okay.
But we're
Judge
not gonna
Schaefer.
get these beds.
I don't know whether or not they'll get these beds for sure, but they will be going to the jail that has this program.
So they're part of their own.
That's what, I wasn't sure if this is like a Norcor all-county reentry program, or if this was specifically Hood River. And of course, it's their money, so.
It's,
but-
yeah, oh, sorry.
No, that's, yeah.
But it's possible that there are other funds involved in this, so the, if the funding for Hood River and then the funding from Wasco are paying for some small amount of a mental health clinician and a program director to be situated at Norcor.
Okay.
And so, you know, it is possible that the other, and I don't know for certain other counties are kind of kicking in to help with the rest of these services.
That's a great question. We should follow up on that because one of the things that we really tried to do was to have counties work on collaborating in ways that they could work together with this, with these grant funds. So we should see if the tri-counties would be able to access the resources that they're investing in, or if it is limited to the Hood River offenders and the Wasco offenders.
Well, what I learned at the convening is Judge Schaefer from Gillum County oversees a group, a board that oversees Norcor and their programming to look at consolidating and sharing services.
So maybe they do all have access.
So even though it's not in the applications explicitly that they can get there, I mean, the idea could be raised, and we can go back out and ask about it.
So their second program is a Telenate Guardian. So this is a low-cost, smartphone-based offender monitoring. It's basically an app. It can be installed on the offender's phone, or the grant is also asking for 5 phones that the co-motivation can provide for offenders who don't already have a phone. The offenders receive kind of random prompts for check-ins. These prompts can be set by a case manager and triggered manually at any time. And then they hold up, it takes a picture of the offender and they say, I believe it's numbers, and they do voice recognition, and they check to make sure this is the person's where they're saying they're supposed to be, and it's the actual person.
Slur recognition too.
And then it also has GPS monitoring, and it has software that tracks and logs all of these check-ins. So Hood River actually plans to use this for their low-risk offenders. They are relying on the concept of least restrictive sanction in custody. So they're thinking not their case level folks, but the people that may require a little bit more reporting, but may have jobs or may have other obligations in the community. And so this allows them to be able to still report, but also continue with those other obligations. And they also view it as being able to have free up time for their officers to be able to focus on those high-risk offenders and get more contact with the folks that they think need it, rather than the individuals that they would be monitoring through this program.
Just have to make sure to keep the phones charged.
Not an excuse.
Yeah.
So the next program is expanding current services. It's the Community Corrections Adult Probation Treatment Program. They serve medium and high-risk offenders with substance abuse and/or a property crime offense. The treatment focuses on criminal thinking, mental health, and substance use issues, and the funds will go to provide an additional treatment provider and then also program supplies. They currently only have 1 provider, so this is going to increase their capacity significantly. And then the last program is short-term housing. They also identified housing as a serious need in their community for folks that are releasing either from local custody or DOC. And the funds will go toward renting a motel room on an annual basis at a reduced rate of $50 a day. So they'll have that available.
How much does that cost to rent a hotel room for $50 a day? Just quick math, I was trying to figure it out.
You probably could build a house.
That's what I was wondering, right?
Your construction over time, and you have more than one individual in a facility.
$36,000.
Cost efficiency.
So that's 730 nights for $36,000.
So if you have how many individuals who are in need of housing, you take and calculate that, it may be a lot more.
Would be surprised.
Is that what Arnie said? And
In Josephine
and
County
those
also.
counties
Yeah.
also, because from the standpoint of efficiency, I think that there's not much value.
Yeah. It could be that Hood River is kind of in a similar situation to Deschutes in a lot of ways too, though, with housing costs and property costs being higher than I know Josephine, for example, and probably Harney as well. I don't know.
I haven't looked at the housing stats for Hood River. I know what's going on in the Chiefs.
Yeah.
In Multnomah County, it's impossible.
So their victims, 10% is going to Columbia Gorge Children's Advocacy Center and the Child Abuse Intervention Center. And the funds will go to support a new staff position, and it's a bilingual child and family advocate. And they did provide a kind of breakdown of the demographics of who they're serving. And so they're serving an Hispanic population at just below their English-speaking population. So this is a good identified need for them, for their area. And CJC staff recommends approval, and the victims panel recommended approval of the victims 10%.
Questions, concerns? Okay, next up is Jefferson.
Jefferson's funding request is $331,627. As you will see in the next slide, there.
Sure.
The prison use is up. However, they are speaking to that directly through their program that they're developing. So early release and downward departure supervision is their program. All of their funds are going towards that. It's going to fund one full probation officer as well as treatment in the amount of about $77,000 and jail beds for swift and certain sanctions. So they'll be able to provide those. This PO is specifically going to focus on that downward departure population as well as the folks that come out for short-term transit. Jefferson County does not have any issue with accepting their short-term trans leave, but they want to try to reduce their recidivism through more intensive monitoring and more face time for contacts.
Did they comment on what was driving that prison use number in their application?
We didn't ask that question, actually, of what specifically was driving it, or I didn't go back and ask that. The fact that they had directly addressed the problem and figuring out how to try and develop a program on how to fix that.
I'm just trying to link what they think the problem is with what they think the solution is to see if they're logically matched.
Right.
Kelly, how many of these counties are reaching out to you for data regarding their specific populations?
A lot of them, especially, and a noticeable increase since Tuesday. But Jefferson has in the past, and so from the latest strict data, and also the one earlier from that, they've had quite an increase in their property intakes. And so I don't know exactly what's happening in Jefferson County, but that's what's causing that number to go up. And so I know that their community corrections director, Kurt Simmons, I think is his name, he's looked at that information to help inform this program, and then also to see, what specific crimes are driving that. And it was really those property problems.
Well, it's good to know, because that's a great resource. I hope counties know that information is very easily available.
And then their victims 10% is going to Saving Grace, and while in their application they were not specific as to what kind of services they were going to fund, I did reach out to them, and they are going to fund primarily direct services and youth and outreach as well, but it's primarily all going to direct services. So that was good to know. And so CJC staff and the victims panel
We're frozen again.
will recommend approval. So that should be green.
Oh, yes.
It's delayed, of course.
technology.
There.
Great.
Any questions, concerns like that?
Taken 30 years ago.
Ross.
So we got Lake County up next.
All right, so Lake County's funding request is for the 167,677 with the percent be 17,386. So what Lake County decided to do, and they're throwing really all of their weight behind this, is their adult drug court. It's actually more of a hybrid court because it will accept, because of the population, but we only have so many judicial resources. It's a hybrid court, so it will be accepting, adult drug court offenders and other specialty court types. And they actually reached out to CJC and asked and wanted a little bit of consultation on how to make this work properly. They also, I went down there and had a look at their court and everything, so I got to see firsthand what it is they're talking about. Even though it's already functioning as a court, this really is their startup. So this represents ultimately the beginning of the Lake County Adult Drug Court. One thing I want to say is this funds part of a court coordinator, 2 subsidized beds, so there's a little bit of housing, mental health treatment, and training in ADCP. So that was one of the recommendations that CJC had made is make sure that folks get to go to training so you can do the 10 key components of fidelity. And they, of note, they did specifically say they're moving away from the zero tolerance, basically zero tolerance in this program, allowing for increased services or sanctions, and they're hoping that keeps them from having a lot more revocations and it presents them with more opportunities to supervise people in the community. So they were very explicit about that. The 10% victims piece, Lake County Crisis Center provides assistance to victims and survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, including teenagers. And the New Beginnings Intervention Center is in the North County. So this is, our understanding was, and this is also the victims panel's understanding, is the Lake County Crisis Center is serving the southern piece, and then the New Beginnings is going to be serving the north. And the northern piece provides education, violence prevention services, crisis intervention, and they're both being functioned.
Are they in separate locations?
They are. One's in Christmas Valley, the New Beginnings is in Christmas Valley, and then the Crisis Center is in Lakeview. They're actually separate programs. They're not the same program.
And so anyway, what really stood out to me though is their willingness to collaborate on this, and they know that they're new in implementing the 10 key components of an adult drug court, but they are receptive to feedback, they're receptive to peer review and site visits on this. So I think they're approaching this in really with their heads in the right place.
Question, I noticed that some filled out the racial and fiscal impact statements and some did not.
I believe we have,
We're missing numbers.
we should have these folks.
So when they're missing, we go out and ask them, because we expect them to be submitted in there as part of the full application.
Not unless you place them in
Because
different
yours
spots in
missing.
the app, in the application. I just noted, Lake does have theirs, but it's blank. They didn't check at least before my app. And Jefferson did fill theirs out, so.
Is yours blank then?
No, mine's got a check in the number 3 where it says their proposed project will have no disproportionate unique impact.
So you all, like, looking at the back of each one, and like I said, let's see which one doesn't, not unless you put them in different spots.
Yeah, it could be that
Good
something on the
River,
next
yeah,
one.
Good River doesn't have one, so.
Okay. Be true. Those that we go through. We did reach out to them as well and just with some suggested measures. So I know that I sent them some stuff that our data and research team worked on, and they were excited and willing to collaborate on those using the phrase of very doable, and we will make those happen.
So whether they made your packets by the time we send them out, we do make sure we get those in some cases so that we add them to our file. But it may not have made your electronic submission for one reason or another. Sorry about that. So we cover this, we approved of all.
I'm good there.
Any questions, concerns about Lake? Okay.
So Lane County, folks may remember Lane County last time during the early phase of our review of these applications. They took out $130,000 from their original request because that was for a domestic violence program that we felt like, having done some research in-house here, was not only was it shown to be ineffective, but actually at times can be shown to be somewhat harmful. So they did a little more digging in on that. It was also, there were some questions about it serving a population that might not meet the 3194 criteria. So they pulled it out and they decided to do a rewrite, do some research. And what they've done now is they submitted this application for the $130,000. So we're gonna have to worry about the victims 10%, but the 3%. And what these are going to do is they're going to allow Lane County to provide an evidence-based batterer intervention curriculum called MRTDV. So it's going to be by the same folks that do moral recognition therapy. And in their application, if you remember, they really detailed how that, they showed how that differentiates from the Duluth model, which was the one that was giving us some concerns initially. So they felt confident moving this forward and asking the grant review committee to take a look at it. They did highlight in there that preference is given to prison-eligible felony offenders. And we even suggested to them another DV recidivism rate, that they track that, and they were on board with it. So that's where it stands.
So we're essentially approving moving from one model to another.
Essentially, yes.
I think they really kind of just fleshed out what it was when they first sent it to us. We had some questions, and the timeline was so tight that we didn't have enough information. And so they really kind of answered all our questions and just satisfied us that, you know, it's an evidence-based program and that they'll be following that.
Who's going to be actually providing it? I mean, where's it housed?
It's my understanding that it's being provided by Donovan Newmeyer in the probation office.
Oh, it says the provider selected
Okay.
will be required to implement the program with fidelity to the model and follow all evidence-based practices. So they have not selected the provider yet. And whether or not that's going to be done in conjunction with community supervision.
Does it say in the budget?
Nope, it just says to be determined, procurement process in progress. And you're going to get a similar response to that in another county that we'll talk about later.
My only question is, these are 3194 crimes. My understanding was that we were supposed to be targeting those property and crime and drug. It's not that I don't think this is important, I mean, I think it's great, but I just don't know if we're moving off of what the target was.
We did reach out to them with that concern, and what they came back to us with is that primarily this is going to be folks that do meet criteria for 3194, but also have these DV charges. So adhering to the risk principle, cognitive behavioral DV program will target 70 treatment-ready preparation action maintenance DV offenders assessed as medium or high risk. And the program will give preference and aim to focus on prison-eligible felony participants.
Word preference. But this is my case, so I'm concerned as to, you know, where they're going with this and it really fitting the criteria. I mean, all counties have to be meeting those.
So I think the way that, and we had the same immediate concerns with them too, is about domestic violence, and they're even talking about misdemeanor domestic violence, supervising that caseload, which hasn't been funded in the past with 1145 funds, and so, you know, and I think their response to us was that, you know, out of the 4 goals. This one isn't really targeted at your reduction of DOC prison usage with the Measure 57 property and drug crimes, but they're looking at reducing recidivism as a goal, public safety as a goal, so kind of the broader other goals. So, I mean, this, like we've done with every county, we've said that your application has to speak to all 4 goals. And this program might not specifically speak to the Measure 57 drug and property offender parts, but other parts of their application do. So this is one program out of the entire program.
My concern is that, we can always stretch all of that and give a lot of, and how much latitude are we willing to actually give in this grant distribution. So I think that's a question that has to be asked. If it's, if our target is, on those under 3194, and it's not meeting 3194, we can always stretch on the convention end for as far as talking about recidivism. I mean, I think every county can get into that gamemanship.
Yeah.
So I too have some concern.
I was in a long discussion, I went nowhere in my home county on whether the victim services dollars needed to be directly linked to the 3194 batch of crimes. So I don't think that's crystal clear. And I don't know what the answer is. I listened to literally 6 or 7 viewpoints for better than an hour and got nowhere. So I'm not sure, and I don't know what the statutory read is on whether those victim services dollars are general victim services, or they have to be tied to the family of crimes we're talking about.
The victim services piece, I think, statutorily is broader than property and drug crimes. I mean, we've funded a lot of domestic violence programs, a lot of child abuse type programs, and we've looked at that much broader. But I think, the rest of the bill in targeting these programs, it doesn't say in the statute must only be spent on property and drug crimes, but the statute is pretty much talking about those crimes in the programs. So it's a fair interpretation that I think the programs targeted should be around those same areas that the statute talks about overall. The way we did as staff approach every application was say, there are 4 goals laid out in 3194. Your application has to address all 4 goals, but the individual programs in each application can be directed toward one of the 4 goals. So that's how we've approached this with every county, but it is something that we internally wrestle with, and certainly within the purview of this committee to weigh in on that and advise our commissioners on what your thought process is.
Well, I guess for me, using the terminology preference does not actually say that you're going to.
It's loose.
Yes, very loose.
Well, I think that as we look at even the charts that we saw on Tuesday, we looked at person-to-person crimes, and then we looked at those that we were classifying as 3194 crimes or property and drug crimes.
Right.
I think this blends that a little bit, and I'm a little, although I completely think we need to find ways to fund domestic violence, I'm not sure using this pot of money is how we fund domestic violence. If that's the case, I'd like to rewrite the application.
Yeah. I think there will be others who would like to rewrite their application, and that's my point. It's like getting the nose under the tent, and that's.
Yeah.
So, Monica Dumeier.
This is communications director.
I'm uncomfortable in the batch that we already approved, so if we change course, there's a rearview mirror here, that whole first batch, but I don't know if we consistently apply the rules to, if we can even agree, if there is a change in course. So.
Did we fund any domestic violence program in the first batch?
Nope.
No, I think this is the first time. This is
the first time around.
There are a couple others in this batch.
There are a couple others in this group, but this is the first time this question is before you.
They did say that they believe it will reduce prison population and future victims in the community.
There were POs that were specialized to take on domestic violence and sex offenders in the first batch, but there were no specific domestic violence programs.
We can sit with this too and keep going through. And then you can kind of get the context of all the applications. We can revisit this. I mean, and obviously, I think the way we're approaching this is voting at the end anyway, so there's no need to belabor it right here.
The other part of it, I mean, the lion's share of it, the rest of the months did go
Yes.
for 3194
Yeah.
identified programs.
Smaller reentry stuff, yeah.
What's the total Wayne County grant then?
You know, I don't have that here. I just put the one.
It's a couple, $3.something million.
Yeah. Yeah. So.
Yeah, it's 130, so.
So we'll move on and come back
Yep.
to this after we sit with it for a while. Okay. So the next step's now here.
So now here's receiving 372,615. That's total of, excuse me, 37,000. Their victims program, and then they're remitting 3% back to CJC. You can see they are pretty significantly below the threshold on prison. And their programs, they're putting all of their funding toward one program, it's a 3194 supervision program that is comprehensive treatment and supervision for offenders with history of substance abuse and or property crime offenses, with a focus specifically on short-term trans leave and domestic violence. So much domestic violence. Downward departure pieces. So it does include a pre-sentence assessment to identify qualified offenders. On the downward departure side, if an offender is accepted into the program, they're assigned to a specific role of probation deputy who will coordinate services for them. They'll do drug testing and also make frequent home visits. All the offenders in the program will also receive MRT. So their goals for this program are to provide a local alternative to prison, and then will also reduce the recidivism of their 3194 offenders that they have either accepted back into the community or diverted from incarceration. Their funds are going to go toward the support of a PO, a .2 of a jail coordinator, some sanction beds, treatment, and then client service costs for housing, clothing, and transportation, and then also a little bit of admin as well. And then 10% is going to Project Hub, which serves victims of domestic violence and sexual assault. This will go for the on-call overnight advocate, and then also to help repair, maintain, and then provide utilities for some current housing that they have. It's not emergency housing, it's transitional housing. So for folks that are just in need of a little bit longer, victims that are in need for a little bit longer time before they can transfer to more permanent housing for them and their families. And then, so staff recommends approval, and then also the victims panel recommended approval for the victims 10%.
I like that they cover incentives. $5,000 for incentives is pretty remarkable for a small agency, so that's good.
Any other questions, concerns, comments? Okay. Marion County.
So Marion County is getting a formula of 3.5, as you can see. Their program funding is around $3 million, and they have 11 different programs. So I'm not going to take a lot of time on any of these programs. They are going down a little bit, although they're still yellow. And I just wanted to point out that they are addressing the prison usage piece outside of all of these funds. So while they didn't target any of these funds to go directly to their prison usage or speak to the downward departures or anything like that in here outside of their executive summary, they did talk to us about it, and they are considering more downward departures, and they are going away from the zero tolerance policy. So they have a lot of internal things that the courts and the DAs are working on to try to address that prison usage. And I'm sorry, I
thought about Tiffany, we had a huge community meeting on the issues. Just a few weeks ago, one, to isolate what the problem was, two, to have a meeting on what the solutions could be. And one of the things that we really identified is bringing the judges into the discussion.
We actually have a meeting set in January for that. They're getting a new presiding judge, so we're kind of waiting for everything to settle, and then we're going to bring the judges in. We've met with the DA's office, all the county commissioners. We pretty much met with everyone in the county at this point.
So the first thing is the data system upgrade. This is a very small amount, but their community data link needs some upgrades and some additional programming in order to be able to better identify the link between dosage and outcomes for their probationers. The Demunes Resource Center is getting a small amount of funds. They're a reentry center and they accept, or they will provide help for all prison, jail, probation, and diversions. So they spread their services across a wide range. For the family support program, this is to go to support those coming out of prison in their family environment. So it truly is family support structure to try to help any kind of recidivism that could occur because they have bad family dynamics or whatever that might look like. It also will provide help to any children that are in the home, any spouses that are in the home, again, whatever. The jail reentry program is a reach-in program that will help people that are in the jail more successfully transition out into the community. For Link Up, it is focused on co-occurring disorders, so it really takes the mental health and A&D problems and tries to bring them together and provide that assistance for those that are not receiving it in some other format, some other program outside of the community. For Marion County Adult Drug Court, they're receiving $40,000, or they're asking for $40,000 for your UA specific. They will need to identify a treatment provider before they can use these funds, and the commissioners and everybody are aware of that, but they're in the transition period right now for their treatment provider. The 416 program is involved in the RCT with Lane County right now, and they are actually going to double. Right now they have 110 people that they serve for the last biennium. They're doubling that to 240. Half of that 120 will be for the control group, and the other half will actually receive the services of the program. Right? The SOAR program is another reentry program that provides support in structured groups as well as cognitive behavioral therapy.
That one's having a huge, has a 95% so far success rate.
Wow, that's
They did
incredible.
indicate that they were doing
It's
well.
the one that's grant that's being done by Humana.
This substance abuse treatment program is for any offender or probationer that doesn't qualify for any of the other things. So it doesn't qualify for services at the Demunes Center or the drug court or 416 or any of the other myriad of services that Marion County provides. And then transitional housing is going to focus on additional housing for sex offenders as well as juvenile offenders. This victims assistance program is within the 87% per program, and it's going to a bilingual services advocate that will work jointly with the DA's office as well as the Center for Hope and Safety, so it'll be system and community-based to help with restraining orders because they've had a huge influx of need. That's their primary focus, is to help with restraining orders because they've had a huge influx of need. And their 10% is being split evenly between the Liberty House and the Center for Hope and Safety. We recommended approval, and the victim panel as well recommended approval. I know we went through that really fast, but we could have talked about it for an entire day with 11 programs. So if anybody has any specific questions, there's no new programs, they're all existing programs. And that was something that we definitely noticed. But their application is very focused on recidivism, and externally they are working on their prison reduction.
They didn't keep their money for doing a study. It looks like their 416 group's going to be split between control. Are they going to come to CJC for an analysis of that?
The RCT that Wayne and Marion are both involved in with the 416, that's what their 3% will go towards.
Okay.
So it will subsidize what we're already doing.
Yeah, good catch.
And how are they doing that? Is it truly randomized? Or-
Yeah, it's randomized. We're working with researchers from the Oregon Social Learning Center in Eugene. And thus they're overseeing the randomization part of it, but they've got a program that will randomly put someone into either the control group or the treatment group. And they're balancing the group on gender, risk level, maybe something else. Maybe race. No, not race. But yeah, so that they don't accidentally have it all in one group. So it'll be really well done.
And is the control group getting a lower level services or?
Yeah, they're getting
those
basic probation as usual.
Basic probation?
Yeah.
Yeah, we didn't have much success in talking about that in Oklahoma County.
Oh,
The
yeah.
judiciary pretty much just said no.
Yeah.
We found that that's a still a big proposition for a lot of counties, especially people that are really feel strongly about their programs. Having somebody not pick this thing that they're wanting to do is for some folks unbearable.
Yeah.
Be interesting to see how it works out. Or 3 years worth of patients to see.
Mm-hmm. Unless we get more in, but yeah, it'll be, we already have the first person that's been randomized, so it's on its way.
Any other questions, concerns of Mary?
Multnomah County. So substantial ask for Multnomah County.
Yes.
2.1 million. As you can see, they're green, very much green.
That's over 2,000 prison months saved since they've started this.
They're saving it right now.
This is,
Are they
oh,
saving
yeah.
it?
Yeah, between short-term trans leave in Multnomah County, that's why we are where we're at.
So I endeavored to put this all on one slide and give you a pretty decent snapshot. So these funds will be used to add and enhance components to the already existing NCJRP program in an effort to increase the program's overall effectiveness and to address identified gaps. So here's some bullet points of what these funds plan to continue or increase the capacity for this program to do. Target eligible high and very high risk need offenders. Perform risk need assessments to determine how individuals can be managed safely in the community. Produce reports used by the defense, prosecution, and court designed to inform the sentencing process. If you ever sit in on any of these 7 a.m. meetings, which I think some of you in here have, there's even ongoing discussions about how to make sure that these judicial settlement conferences are consistent from chambers to chambers.
Is this kind of going back to a PSI type of model?
Sort of, but.
It's a lot wider, yeah.
Yeah.
Tim can talk about it.
Not as much detail, and specifically targeted, and then that probation officer that completes that report is the first supervising PO if they don't end up going to prison. So there's actually a relationship built in an assessment period. They're there for the settlement conference. They're there for sentencing if it doesn't work out in settlement conference, and then they're assigned to them.
It's nice to have the same judge and the same PO there for all that too, because everybody kind of agrees on this plan. That has just never happened before.
Yeah, no, that's very innovative as to
Yeah.
back to the future type of a.
Yeah, there's no handoffs. Everyone's been there all the way along the system and continues to stay with that one probationer.
And surprisingly, for people who seem pretty hardened to the system, these people aren't going through their first sentencing, that relationship built between the PO and the offender. We do all these listening sessions, which take a lot of time, but what we hear in the listening sessions is the relationship with the PO is why I'm not in prison. It's a one-on-one relationship. They don't want to let the PO down. The PO's investing in them. Frankly, I was amazed when we started hearing that as a consistent theme.
And this program is eligible for more than just 3194 offenders also, correct?
It is, yeah. It takes some second tier measure 11 folks. They were finding, I think, that some of those people were getting probation anyway. There were times where they could kind of get out of measure 11 and stuff like that. And so they decided if we're going to have, if the judges in Multnomah County are going to depart on these things, we want to make sure that they get this first 120 days of intensive supervision. If they run off, leave treatment, they actually have officers dedicated to go finding them and bringing them back, which is another innovative progress. But yes, they kind of wrapped that into it as well.
Is there no hope in Multnomah County for your gang situation? Okay.
I don't know. It does seem to be spiraling back to Back to the Future, I mean, if we get back to those early 90s levels, it's going to be, it's unacceptable, but it seems to be a trend. Tomorrow there's a big symposium, I've got another commitment I can't go to, but I can't remember who it's hosted by.
What's your count, Nick? You're up there, is the number of your, is it 20?
Yeah, it was in the high 20s for homicides this year.
Well, just to round out these bullet points, this program also, the funding provides 120 days of intensive supervision for those assigned to NCJRP. It also funds a myriad of treatment services. I was not going to detail all of them, but basically what the providers are offering, this program will have the funds to help them tap into that. And because of the assessment and everything, it's going to be tailored to the needs of the individual to make sure they can be supervised in the community. And something new, this program is going to establish a treatment readiness norm within Multnomah County's Inverness Jail. Now, there's been lots of talk about what all that's going to include. We actually sent an email out because they haven't identified a provider yet. And they still haven't, but what they did is they sent me that they're accepting proposals all the way up until the 23rd of this month, and then they'll review those. So, similar situation to when I reported earlier. Another question we asked is, they made some corrections to the budget, but we asked about their administrative allocation. Their administrative allocation, though it was less than the 10% minimum or maximum, it's substantial. It's in $600,000 and some odd thousand. So I just felt it was important for me to report back to you that, and I had mercy on you and did not forward the document that was sent to me. There's a very, very lengthy document that basically shows, it details the formula, shows previous year budgets and all these different departments, and the parameters, the guidelines that they use to arrive at that number. So I have that, if any of you would like it. It's probably only 40 or 50 pages. But it did explain it in detail, that the allocations according to that document are justifiable.
That's something that we haven't seen in a lot of counties. Some counties have specifically allocated some of these funds for administrative, which is within the rights of the grants to do that. A lot of counties didn't explicitly do that, and so it really jumped out to us the amount of money, because of it's all percentage, it's all proportional to the grant. So it's a very large amount of money, and so we tried to do our due diligence to make sure, but
we wouldn't want that to just be a policy-directed decision, rather a need-based decision for what do you have to do to administer a grant.
So the amount,
we probed it a little bit.
in case you were curious, the amount is $629,460.
I told them they should outsource administration, like, Wasco or something. They can do it for half.
There you go. All right, victims 10%, 2 large allocations and 1 smaller one. The Oregon Crime Victims Law Center. So these funds are going to pay for 2 attorneys to be based at the Gateway Center for Domestic Violence Services. So what this will do is allow the survivors of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking to access the legal assistance, while also accessing a wide variety of other services. So really one-stop shopping for the legal and the other things. Impact Northwest, these will expand the capacity for a parent-child involvement project. It's through the Correctional Department of Human Services, and it's designed to meet the needs of parents and children who have experienced domestic abuse. And Lutheran Family Services, this is the other sizable allocation. These funds will be used to provide victims advocacy services for 350 crime victims who have experienced a wide range of general crimes and have no existing community-based support network. So what I thought kind of stood out about this is the wide range of general crimes that they're victims of. So we see a lot of domestic violence, sexual assault, stalking, things like that, but this broadens that a lot more. I thought that was worth noting. So something unique to Multnomah County from all the other applications is we've got a 3% evaluation to the tune of $243,000. And what this proposal does is it leverages justice reinvestment funds to look for empirical evidence of effectiveness of mentorship programs in Multnomah County. If you need any more details about that, We do have folks that are willing to jump in and explain things a little more. It's a quasi-experimental design, and it's going to be comparing professional mentors, volunteer mentors, and no mentors.
So you're going to do an evaluation of if you have the professional mentors, or the volunteer, or none,
Yep, that's where it is.
and what the outcomes are.
And what the recidivism outcomes are. In the quasi-experimental, it's not the randomized control, but essentially what they'll do, you can do it much less expensively.
What is the length of the study?
The length of the study, I think they're just going to go over what, Tim, do you remember? A year or two maybe?
A year, maybe,
A year. But they'll do a match after the fact, right? Or how are they going to set that up?
yeah, they'll do it afterwards, and they match them on a bunch of different criteria. They're doing gender, race, risk level, it was like six or seven things that they're doing on. And about 30% of their mixture people get the professional mentoring, and it's just kind of on a first come, first served basis. So I guess they don't think they could do the randomization, but they'll be able to look at it afterwards.
Can you tell us what qualifies as a professional mentor? Maybe they've gone through that.
Well, ACBO has a certification
Right.
for professional recovery mentors, and I can't remember exactly what they detailed in here, but I may have just made the assumption that that's what they're meaning by the professional mentors.
And is it mental health or ED mentors? Because ACBO, because there's both kinds of certification on the health side and then the AD side.
Yeah. It'd be good to ask about the mental health piece though.
We saw a lot, one other thing we liked about this is that we saw lots of applications that have mentors in it, and there's not a lot of research from my understanding on that, so this would be kind of a good first swipe at it. So we thought it was something good that could be exported to other parts of the state if the study's done.
I think sponsors put together some research on their mentor program.
Yeah, I think they might have just gotten some federal money to
I
study.
think they did.
Yeah. So that'll be great, because it really is kind of an area that a lot of our grantees are looking at, because we, a lot of evidence where we feel like anecdotally it's working really well, and so this would be a good chance to really test that.
Bridgeway.
Yeah.
But I mean, it kind of goes back to what also comes in with the COs. So when you have that bond and someone's working with them all the time. This goes back, I've used this example with Ron Chase, who was the first director of sponsors. In '94, sat me down and told me about a program that with DOC in the early '90s where they had 30 people come out, they weren't cherry picked, they gave them 30. And they did everything we're trying to do now. And after a year, all but one was in compliance. And so, that shelter, treatment, education programs, all that. And I've been pushing, I'm trying to figure out why that model didn't move forward back then as compared to what we're seeing now.
Usually it's resource-based.
No.
Because if we go back and pull off and dust off some of the old activities, even of the old years of the LAA activity and the CETA activity, we will find some of the same sponsor and mentoring.
Yeah, I think a lot of counties are really starting to think when it comes to mentors about the timing of the mentor, the seamlessness of the mentor involvement. So whether there's some mentorship in custody and then transition seamlessly to some mentorship outside of custody. I like the trend.
The other thing that's available now too is if you are a mentor associated with a treatment agency, you can bill OHA for that. And so there are some ways to be sustainable over time, but you have to be, in our county, we just started a mentoring program, and we have 2 mentors coming on with our funds, but in a year, we anticipate they're going to be sustainable because they're integrated with the treatment program. It's not very much, I think it's $15 every 15 minutes or something that you get reimbursed, but it's better than not. And so if you had paid mentors, the likelihood that they're going to consistently show up and that kind of thing.
Right. And we'll certainly get an accurate accounting of their hours that they spend in terms of contacts.
Yeah.
2 birds, 1 stone.
Right. Then, correct me if I'm wrong, to be a professional recovery mentor, you also have to be a recovering addict in order to get that certification?
I do not know that for sure.
Maybe that's just the opinion.
I don't think that's true. I think think you just have to have at least 2 years of sobriety before they'll certify you through ACCO.
I know you definitely, for any other certifications you do, if you're in recovery, you do have to sign a thing saying that you are promising that you have at least 2 years in recovery, but I don't know for sure that's required. That might run its course.
I don't think that's accurate.
Okay, so that is Multnomah County. The programs are recommended for approval by CJC staff and the victims 10% panel, and no issue in approving the victims 10%.
Any additional questions, concerns? Sherman County. Randy, go Sherman.
That's me as well. Sherman County is another one of the $100,000. Their funding requested is $87,000. Is that green?
It is.
All right. That's very small.
Very, very small.
Yeah, so that's good. Okay, so with $62,000 of the funds, program number 1 is the Sherman County Community Outreach. What these funds will be used for is to hire a community outreach coordinator to provide services to offenders and those determined to be at high risk of committing crimes. So let me give you a little bit of detail here. This program does serve those that are not yet criminally involved. So, and this is a quote from their transient substance users, individuals who are suicidal, individuals who started engaging in criminal activities at juvenile, and individuals who are reported to law enforcement but are not charged with a crime. This funds .10 FTE, or Community Outreach Coordinator, pays for parenting classes, cell phone, office supplies, postal, which you guys don't worry about, $30,000 worth of life skills classes and trainings. Tri-County Community Corrections. This program will provide financial assistance for the treatment expenses of offenders on probation and parole who do not have means to pay. Recognize that at some point they'll transition into some sort of coverage. And it will also support a work crew coordinator to set up and supervise work crew every month. And this just gives them another response option with the work crew. Moving on to Bridges 10%. These funds will go into community counseling solutions, which we discussed before. It's going to be very similar.
So this is a little bit different than Wheeler and Gillum. So Community Counseling Solutions will be contracting out with Katie Paul. She is currently the DA's victim advocate, and she does that part-time. And so this would be for her to do another part-time job as a community-based victims advocate. So to be able to provide kind of both services. There's currently not a community-based victims advocate in this county. So she would be contracted through Community Counseling Solutions to also provide some community services as well and be able to meet with victims without DHS or law enforcement in the community, and also provide more long-term services once an individual is no longer involved in the criminal justice system.
I think if you look at the actual numbers that they're into, it's kind of like,
Yeah.
And this was the county, if I'm not mistaken, where they just had the systems based, and now this is generating. Yeah, so it's, I think that's.
I mean, as part of part 1, they want to impact all 1,700 households in the county, right? So they have big ambitions to get the
well,
word
I
out.
mean, smaller communities, actually in a lot of ways, because it's kind of neighbor to neighbor. And the resource needs are different than the resource needs in Multnomah or Marion, Clackamas County, or large urban counties.
All right. So we are, similar to the changes requested piece is we are still waiting on a little bit of feedback from our victims panel on the reg quote.
No, we're moving ahead. So they had a general concern with the community counseling solutions, just about victims not being the core of their services. But based on our follow-up with the counties and talking to their judge and their DA, victim person, excuse me, I talked to their judge, that was in 2 minutes. We're comfortable based on the concerns raised by the panel that this should move forward. So this is staff recommendation on this. the victim now has had a chance to relook at our follow-up. So.
And CJC staff approved the program.
Any questions or concerns about moving this forward? Okay. Dylan, if you could.
So Tillamook's first round of application, like what Paul mentioned earlier, was kind of all over the place, and we did a lot of work with them to refocus it in and try to dial back the number of pages, because I think it came in originally at like 60-some pages with 6 or 7 of my program areas, and so we worked with them really hard to try to combine everything and get the answers to the questions that we were looking for. So Tillamook is up just a little bit in prison usage, and most of their money is really going to the community corrections. This is a current probation officer that they have right now. Last biennium, we supported them with Justice Reinvestment Funds for 0.5 of this FTE for this probation officer. However, going forward, they would like to use 90% of the 90% of the salary will be paid by Justice Reinvestment and 10% will be paid by other state funds. This current officer is going to receive some specialized training for domestic violence and sex offenders and take on that caseload specifically, as well as any other specialized caseloads that they identify might be a good fit. And then also implement the stages of change for the entire parole and probation department. So they're going to go through the training on how to teach everyone else that and then figure out how to implement it within their department. So it's going to be a highly trained probation officer. In addition, that community corrections dollars will go towards housing. It will go towards providing food handler permits, because that is kind of the main employment opportunity for a lot of these folks that have a record.
For getting the offenders to qualify for food handler permits.
Offenders trained in food handler permits, and then also providing some training for a GED program to be able to go into the jail and do some training.
Do we know, I mean, out of curiosity, knowing Florence is kind of similar, having a lot of tourist base, in the off-season, are those individuals still maintaining their employment?
I don't know that answer.
Yeah, I'm just curious, because I understand why, I mean, we have a lot of people out, there's certain restaurants on Oneida in Florence, as the prosecutor just.
Well, the whole coastal area would be dollar in those categories.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, but also knowing there's so many limitations and other opportunities for jobs.
Right. I've never asked that question, but that's a good question. And then they're also developing this outpatient treatment program with their local counseling there. For $20,000, they'll have 4 different facilitators that will do some kind of treatment. We're going to work with them a little bit on which type of treatment that should be, because they provide an entire list, and we're going to kind of create our own program off of that. But we did let them know that, focusing on one program might be the better way to go. Focusing on MRT or thinking for change or something like that, and not just pulling what they believe is valuable, because they can't implement it.
It sounds like they're diluting, you're saying, what was it, 4 or 5 out of the 20?
They're having 4 facilitators, right? It's supplemental funding because their counseling agency is completely funded, so Tillamook County will just be providing this $20,000 to pay kind of a per hour for these 4 facilitators. So we have more work to do with them on that, but they were open to our suggestions, and generally speaking, it's a good program that will help the folks coming out of jail. So we were willing to support that. And then in addition, for the victims 10%, this is going to be renamed in the very near future to Tillamook County Victims Resource Center instead of Tillamook County's Women's Resource Center. We flagged this as far as the racial and fiscal impact statements go. They've marked that will have no disproportionate impact. And I thought that that would be strange if it was a women's resource center, that it wouldn't have a positive impact for women. But they did say that they do focus on everyone and it is their local provider, and so they are working on renaming that. And they have allocated all of the funds to that resource center. Initially, they had given a small amount of funding to the sheriff's chaplain, but we worked with them to take that out and instead direct it all to this resource center to direct services. Staff recommends approval and the advisory panel recommends approval as well.
Any questions, comments?
So the domestic violence piece in here, will that include misdemeanors that they're looking to supervise?
I think it'll be anyone. Yes.
I guess I'll just go back to, it seems like that's outside of our 3194 funding. The specialized training that they're talking about for the PO, there's no cost for those trainings for the sex offender supervision academy, or the domestic violence academy for criminal probation officers as far as going through that specialized training. So I get it, I just want to put out there that I'm worried that we're now moving from property and drug offenders to person-to-person things.
So shall we come back to that one as well? Or
I think the last couple have had the same, if we look at the victim services piece, it's a recurring theme. We're funding a lot of domestic violence services. And I'm okay funding them, it seems a little odd, we're peeling a couple of counties out, but it's in about 3/4 of what we looked at today.
I think as far as the victim services for the 10%, I don't think we're being specific on that. That just has to be community-based, nonprofit, or private victims. So if they want to fund cancer violence, that's fine.
If that's our firm answer, I'm okay. If that isn't the same answer I heard out of Mike.
Well, that was a part one, not a victim 10%, that Lane County 130.
Oh, I thought it was in.
No, it's not a victim 10%.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, but I can see how that's confusing.
But I do think that in the discussion, even with the victims service, that emphasis should be made, recognizing that the statute was broad, but it's still, part of the focus of trying to reduce your recidivism. So even though, they've got a lot more latitude, I think encouraging them to actually focus on that population would be a plus.
Kelly, did Tillamook County reach out?
Yeah, because they come across the same way we do.
Their population?
You kind of, not that I understand who qualify for victim services. Sure you do.
I think if the county, if the county really looked at what their numbers look like, and if they are saying we're doing as much as we can for 3194, we want to
We
expand
want to
that.
expand. Then I think that's it.
Well, that was a couple of my questions that I was going to have for Lane County, and I guess maybe this county too, is how many property offenders are they sending out? How many are they targeting in their original 3194 grant? And how many DV offenders do they have now? And what is that target? Because I agree with what Tim said. I think we want them to put all their money and resources into this primary population. If they say we maxed out this population, let it bleed over to the others. I agree.
And since we're on this kind of going back to when I was talking about reference to what you do, so do we require some type of reporting back as to how many of the people they're serving do actually meet the criteria 3194, or we're just having the assumption that this is what's happening? I'm just wondering if we want to start tracking that so we can see that, what that number might be, and some type of overview requiring that the money should be first used for that population and then the remainder going the other way, because that would probably make me feel more comfortable statewide if we deal with it. It sounds like some of the other members are saying the same thing. I'm here to advocate for my district, 2 counties, but at the same time, we need to make certain we're not opening something that we're going to come back and say, oh my gosh, how do we justify this to the other counties that said that, well, we didn't do that. We didn't include that. So what I've heard Tim, say, Nikki, I'm much more comfortable with that type of proposal. Is there something that's required when they report back to have breakouts?
On the reporting piece, we're actually kind of working out what that's going to look like right now. And the way we've been thinking about it is is tracking the offenders who get the resources allocated to them. And so tracking, if you got put in a program funded by Justice Reinvestment, we'd like to, and this is the part where we're still working out how the level of detail we can get, but at least maybe even just the SIN number of the person who goes to that program, so that we can say overall, we can look at the type of offender and the volume of offenders that go towards Justice Reinvestment funded programs. So that's, I think, how we're thinking about that right now in terms of tracking things.
All on the offenders.
On the offender side.
It could be a limitation that current lands, but looking at victim services in Multnomah County, property crimes aren't on the map with what victim services people pay attention to, and neither are drug crimes, for obvious reasons. So it was clearly, doesn't fit their methodology. They just, property crime victims aren't typically wanting engagement in the process. It takes too long, it's laborious, they just want an insurance company to pay for their stolen stuff and move on with life. So even if you did try and make some intrusion into that population, you may get no thanks.
Oh yeah, the tracking for the victim side is completely different. Yeah, completely different. On the program side of the offenders accessing the program, that's what I thought you were talking about. I might have misunderstood that question.
I think we're clear on the program side.
Okay, I missed that.
The tracking on the program side, I think trying to get our handle around what kind of tracking is going to occur on the victim services.
It's a good question.
I can just tell you what our plan is. So there's 4 criteria, like when they responded to the RFP, I won't remember it exactly, but marginalized populations, access and barriers, and trauma-informed. So those criteria is what we're envisioning would show up in their reporting to us. And then there would just be some kind of expenditure tracking. So if you have $10,000, what portion of the $10,000 went to serve this? And it could be that it cross-cuts, right? So, but that's what we've envisioned asking for. And then having them tell us a success story or two over the biennium about the impact of the 10%. So it's not case level tracking that we're considering there. Doesn't mean we can't. It just, we haven't thought about going to that level, because that would introduce real burdens to the 10% for community-based providers. But if they report how they're expending the funds to target the 4 criteria, we've talked to the panel about that. They think that's a good thing to collect.
Yeah, especially because the victims don't necessarily have to have a case filed, like we said, so that would make that challenging.
Right, and I was talking about on the program side, or 87% side.
Yeah. So that's tracking on the 87% side. You want to look at the offenders who are actually going into JRFI funded programs, and then that'll also help us track outcomes, at least for recidivism and nothing else.
And I think I'm looking out now, when it's reporting time, because your reporting time is going to have to deal with both the 87% and that other 13%. So you need to collect as much tracking information, even on that 10% that's going to victim services, and just to simply say that we did X allocation victim services without any context. I don't think when it comes time to talk about budgeting and allocations that's going to fly.
Yeah, agreed.
How much people think.
I'm dedicated to getting us out earlier than 2:30 today.
Oh,
You want to go?
Yeah, we're doing great.
If you don't make it to noon, though, you don't get lunch.
We're only 5 minutes away.
So here's the breakdown for Umatilla County. As you can see, for the program funding, we're looking at around 800,000. Umatilla is up. The primary reason that they are up is because they had a big case for UUB. The guy got sent away for a really long time, I guess. Because I did reach out to the DA's or not to the DA, to community corrections.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I'm looking at it, like, wow.
Given probation for that.
He must have a complete car lot.
Only one case. One case was the huge increase in what I was saying. If you look at all of the rest of their information, it's all very flat. I mean, there might have been one additional person sent. I don't know what the difference was, but the judge was here also, and she did say, yeah, I sent him away for a real long time. So I don't have the entire breakdown, but the DA was, I mean, he was responsive and trying to figure out exactly what happened, because to see that their prison was up like that, they just were not really sure why. And so he asked for the case numbers, I think. I'm not sure what they asked for exactly, but Kelly helped me get the information specifically to them. And so we got that back to them, and they were able to figure out.
What, do we know just the general number of how many they're sending into the system? I mean, it could be, if it's just 4 people, one will just.
So you got the total prison months on the side there that tell you, so they're increased by, it looks like about 300 prison months than they were over their 3-year average.
That's a lot.
So,
That takes you back to Louisiana.
I think there's more to the story.
and I mean, I guess you can kind of,
That sounds like one of those Angola prison sentences, right, Jackie?
Yeah, it does.
you could use on that slide back there, you could use Deschutes as kind of a scale. We have in the bigger counties broken it out by per capita prison usage, like when we looked at Multnomah, Marion, and Lane. We haven't done that, especially because a lot of the small counties, it doesn't make any sense to do that because, you know, poor Harney will be off the charts per capita. You know, so that doesn't make any sense. But when you get into like Deschutes and Umatilla, you could go back to doing that kind of an analysis. I mean, they look like they're pretty close to what Deschutes is using, and I'm not entirely sure about population size, but I think Deschutes is bigger.
Deschutes is a lot.
It's a lot bigger than Umatilla. Yeah.
So
And I just wondered because, you know, they had substantial, you know, we closed Blue Mountain and we did some things on the mental health side in Umatilla, so I wonder what drove that number.
So this wasn't the RIF data that I was looking at when I initially started my conversation with them, and prison utilization was not the slide that I was looking at. It was the one that was basing on intakes, and if you look at their intakes, they were all pretty flat from the last year. And then if you looked at the length of stay, it went way up. And so that's why we were digging into that a little bit more. But again, I'm no expert on this, and there certainly is likely more to the story. But I did ask, and they were responsive, so that was a positive thing, I thought. So, based off of our last conversation, we'll go right into this one. Domestic Violence Supervision Program. It is a PO that is dedicated to supervising this domestic violence population in addition to, you know, filling the caseload with other things as well. The DA has committed to plea deals for felony and misdemeanor cases if there is a formal supervision offered. Right now, since 2001, they have not been able to serve this population locally. So anybody that has a felony case that comes in for domestic violence is going to prison, no matter what. Like there's no other option that the DA would entertain. So this was opening up the door to have diversions for these domestic violence populations, which once we talked about it a little bit more as a team, it felt like that was meeting the goals of 3194, since, you know, prison utilization is one of those goals. While it may not be targeting those specific crimes, for this amount of money out of their $800,000 that's going to program funding, we felt like it was realistic because it does target felony and it will just give them somewhere to put these people. And I can tell you that, since 3194 started, they've had 38 cases of domestic violence. 14 of those were felony that went to prison, and that was 3 in the past year. So.
Kelly, you got some
So
updated
I don't have that specific case, I'll see if I can find that, but they have had an increase in their first sentences for their property crimes. So over a 3-year period, 2013 they had 29 intakes, and then 2014 they dropped to 23, and then in 2015 it's gone up to 34. So the increase from 23 to 34 is a lot for their county, but that is an increase of 11 prison intakes. So, 11 additional doesn't sound like a lot, but in their county, it's a big increase. And then their length of stay on those has also kind of gradually ticked up from 27 and a half months to 30 months. So that does seem to kind of be driven by some of those property crimes happening within that. And then their revocations went from 3 to 10 to 6. So that 3 to 10 jump is also pretty substantial, but it is only 7 cases. So they're kind of one of these medium counties, I think, where 11 cases makes a really big difference for them. So I'll see if I can find the chronic car thief. Let you know.
Well, they've had some, there was those who thought they would have a huge economic impact when we actually, especially when we talked about Blue Mountain and what have you, and changing and closing a facility. So you often wonder, whether or not one policy that we choose to make, and that was it impacted more than it needed to make them. So I'll track that closure with the property firm. Because Senator Hansel was very concerned when we lost that facility.
Yeah, and Chief Roberts on the phone is from Pendleton too, so just in case there's extra insight there.
So do you all want to revisit that specific program again later, or?
No, I think we're just curious as to why the numbers were.
Okay. So program 2 is day management. That's for community corrections, and there would be 30 to 40 offenders at very high risk. And they'll all be drug and Measure 57 property offenders that will be part of that day management program. The Guardian Care Center is an advocate for children and families, and they will offer trauma-informed services for that $40,000. That is in addition to their victims' 10%. The jail treatment program will provide offenders treatment, including readiness to change, and it will provide offenders treatment, it will provide readiness to change training, and it will provide program graduation to make sure that they actually are successful in that as they enter the community. For post-prison supervision treatment, right now, they don't have anything to offer for their short-term translate folks, and they want to be able to offer treatment as they come out of prison and give them the resources that they need in order to be able to be successful in the community as far as their treatment offerings go. So that is what that focus will be on, is priority for the short-term translate. And then for their 10% victims, this is again the domestic violence services. That was the only treatment provider they identified there, and it will primarily go to direct services, travel and outreach, as well as a few staff hours, increasing staff hours. And they're going to do an evaluation of their data to try to figure out who they're serving and how they can better serve them. We recommended approval and the panel recommended approval as well.
I have a question about the second program. which was the day management program. That just funds two additional parole probation officers, and that's just salary and benefits. That-
Over the biennium, that sounds, I mean, just looking at the number for 2 years, it seems like, yeah.
Only WPO is about 95,000.
That is correct.
Any other questions, concerns, details? And then I'm just tracking, we've got the Lane 130,000 DV supervision program. Umatilla has a feature on that. Tillamook has a case feature that would include DV. So I'm just trying to track those in case you need to revisit them. Union County,
So Union County has 294,366 for their funding request, and then a little over 30,000 for their victims. They are in the green, fairly low usage. And so if you remember back to the shoots, the program that the Union County is proposing is pretty similar. So they're looking at a pre-sentencing and then also looking at a post-release. So the first one is it says transitional housing in the application, but it's a transitional leave. The goals are to maximize the number of approved SETL applicants, to minimize revocations for failing to comply, and then to provide these offenders with stable housing and support services. So the plan is to focus on assessing STTL eligible offenders, identify their needs, develop a solid case plan, and then once the offenders have come back into the community, they're offered a continuum of services that include day reporting, transitional housing, cognitive behavioral therapy, and then balance of safety and services. Currently, their STTL approval rating is 50%. They have a very lofty goal, wanting to increase this to 100% with this programming. The second is the pre-sentencing, so it's their PSA program. It's a collaboration between community corrections, the DA's office, courts, and sheriffs. This is a new program. It began, it came online November 1st. So the program goal is similar to Deschutes, it's just to assist the DA's office and the courts with parole probation, providing them information regarding the offender's risk of needs, and then their likely responsibility if they are granted probation instead of prison. Once the offender is accepted, they have there's 180 days of intensive supervision, and they are able to access the same services that we just discussed with the STTL program, so wraparound services. And their program goals are minimizing their probation revocations and then just providing as many offenders as possible with these programs and services of treatment.
Kind of sounds like almost a Multnomah-esque model.
Yep. Very much so. And so they actually chose to pay above their victims 10%. So they are using $85,535 to a systems-based victim services program, so the district attorney's victim assistance program, to provide direct advocacy to victims as they work to access their rights through the criminal justice system. And then their 2% is going to Mel Emily Safe Center. This is another child abuse intervention center that focuses on a holistic child abuse assessment and connecting families and victims with resources. And these funds will provide will help MESC be able to provide comprehensive resources regardless of the financial needs of the families involved. And criminal justice staff approved the program's application, and the victims, they all approved the 10%.
any questions, comments, concerns? Okay. Well,
Well, County mentioned earlier that they have withdrawn their 10% victims, so when this slide was put together, it's still showing 10% victims funding, $10,000, but really that's zero. So they are green, their numbers are very minimal out there, and they are one of the minimum counties that's looking at the $100,000, now 90, and then remaining 3% to us. Their first program, I'm not sure why my numbering is off, so I apologize, but their first program is supplemental dollars to the parole and probation.
Is it the right side?
Yes.
Okay.
Obviously, we're not supporting the entire officer with $27,000, but they're one that worth it. And we reached out to them to be sure that they were, doing ethics training and motivational interviewing techniques and having effective interventions, and they're starting to do all of that with their caseloads. The next program is for mental health and transitional housing. The majority of this funding is going towards mental health assessments and then follow-up prescription costs that they might incur at the assessments are $180 each. And that's just to fill the gap between when they actually receive Oregon Health Plan and when they need the assessment, so they can get assessed right away and not have to wait for services. And then the same thing for alcohol and drug assistance. That will be an assessment right out of the gate and then a follow-up appointment if they don't have time to get their insurance in place before that. But they are focused on getting their insurance in place as quickly as possible. Again, they've withdrawn their 10%. And we recommend approval for the program piece.
So you talked a little bit about, maybe Paul, the 10% piece, what we had,
Yeah.
and what we've kind of gone for that.
The original proposal had something called Point of Connection Ministries in it. And the narrative itself listed some approaches when you're intervening with victims that was not best practice. In fact, could be seen as harmful practice. So based on that narrative, based on the selection of the actual victim provider, which there was concerns about as well, the victim panel said, no, we wouldn't approve funding. So we went back to Wallowa County, gave them that feedback. The writer of the grant really, who's the PO out there, I think they have one PO, said, he understood that, he wasn't willing to really fight for that, and that in fact they had considered not even applying for the 10% at all. There's an obvious choice in the county called Safe Harbor, which the PO office has concerns with in terms of domestic violence intervention and how they do that, and they don't believe that they're using a best practice there. They've tried to get them to use a best practice, seeming paying for people to come out and provide training and support. The folks won't attend. So there was obviously a relationship problem there between what could be an obvious victim service choice. But they have other options. They have CASA, they have the CAIC, they have Mount Emily that we just saw in Union that I think has technically coverage for Wallowa. But to mobilize and look at that, their author thought might be a challenge, but he was going to pursue it. And then he had a deadline to get something to us by end of yesterday. And nothing came in, and he kind of left it with us. If nothing comes in, that means we're not going to pursue it.
So this is a community dynamic issue.
I really believe it is. Because I think there's a choice or a couple of choices there that could accept the $10,000 and do something with it. But there's a dynamic issue that's prevented them from mobilizing in time to get that to us. So that's where that is. Now, my point of view is that the money's there. I mean, maybe they'll work on that dynamic and have something down the line that they might want to do with it. And so maybe we could bring this back at a later time, but right now there's no proposal to consider. And we can be encouraging to them. FDA-based victim program, I assume.
Because
I'd imagine.
I would imagine that they do.
They referred to it in that phone call.
Yeah. They have some options, they're just not choosing to exercise those options.
Yeah, the DA's options
Right.
for
I think the other question is if the need is there. And they may not choose to.
And that was what he had originally said. The author of the grant said, we were thinking about not even asking for dollars here. So they might not ever change that part and want to come in for anything. But anything else you remember, Madeline? Should we move on?
Yeah, we're
Okay.
waiting on Wasco.
Wasco, who's got Wasco? Madeline.
So Wasco has a $372,000 funding request, a little over 38,000 for victims. See, they are in the red above their threshold. And they have about 4 different programs. The first one we've seen before, so this is the same program that Hood River is proposing, the number 4 reentry program with the 3 phases. And they are also putting a portion of their funds to a mental health clinician and program directors to make a full salary there for both of those. The second program is expanding services of currently existing program. Wasco County Community Corrections offers drug and alcohol assessments, drug and alcohol treatment, MRT, mental health assessments, and then referrals to mental health, local mental health agencies. They want to expand on these services to make sure that all medium and high risk offenders have timely access. Oh, and then it's also reinstituting a jobs training program that was previously canceled, and that's a local partnership with Mid-Columbia Council of Governments. So the next program is transitional housing. So currently, there are no designated transitional housing units in Wasco that are specifically for offenders, according to their application. They are in the process, along with their lipstick as a whole, and then also working with the National Institute of Corrections, and then also technical assistance from DOC. They've identified that transitional housing is an issue for the county, and they're working to formulate a plan that will start as kind of basic housing vouchers, but will hopefully move into a transitional housing unit created through the partnership of the county and Norcor, and then there's a local nonprofit that's also involved. They have an initial plan, should be into their lipstick next month, and then they're looking to actually start implementation in March of 2016. So this funding is for, it's going to help with planning, but then also to cover their implementation as well. So the bulk of it will be implementation. And then, so their last program is parole and probation training. Again, according to their application, they've not been able to send their parole and probation officers to statewide trainings based on workload and staffing levels for over a year. They currently have 2 openings, and they have been experiencing a high turnover rate. So they're requesting Justice Reinvestment Funds to be able to provide training in current best practices and community supervision. They listed mediation, cognitive behavioral skill development, specialized caseload training, firearms, and ethics. And their goal is to have a training plan by the end of the biennium in place for all of their officers, and that they've completed at least 1 training. So I referenced earlier that these trainings are, some of these trainings are free. I looked at their budget, and they did kind of break down. They want $6,000 for the actual training, $2,100 for lodging, and then $7,265 for meals for setting training. So that's for a total of $15,365 what they're asked for this.
That must be for training other than sex. Yeah. And ethics is expensive.
Okay, that's good to know. And then their victims template is going to Haven, who provides services to victims of sexual assault, domestic violence, dating violence, and stalking. This is going to support point 2 of a housing advocate, and it looks like, so Haven is partnering with DHS around the Safe and Together model, which needs to keep women who are impacted by domestic violence and their children safe and together. And they will be, so this housing advocate will be assisting with housing in the community, but they also ask for funds to start continue their training around the Safe and Together model and how to implement that within their county. And both the CJC staff and the Temple Victims Panel approved the appropriate pieces.
Mike, at some point, because I've been asked this question, because DHS also has victim services dollars, and how much of what's being done is a duplication of overlap, filling this gap with what we're doing, and I plan to have a conversation with Fight Psyche, because it's the whole issue of maximum utilization of the dollar, and so hopefully we're not doing things to replace what's already being done out there in various counties. One of the questions that was asked of me, why don't we just have, and I think he's going to go back and do some checking for me, have the DHS dollars go just to victim services so that we've got a cleaner line.
Yeah, I think, as a state, we don't do a very good job of talking between the agencies, and you hope that the conversation locally is happening, that they understand the resources they have, but it's our experience in a lot of the counties that they're not even aware of some of the resources that they might have through other state agencies or grant streams or other things. It's a big issue for sure, and yeah, we should work on that.
And I think also you mentioned when we talked about, you know, the professional monitors and sponsors, and where there is the ability to have some of that being funded partially or whatever by the Oregon Health Authority. I think we need to pursue those avenues for on a statewide basis and not just for one particular county.
Yeah, on the OHA, CJC has just started having kind of monthly or bi-monthly conversations with them so that they can understand what it is we do and we can try to understand what they do. Those are just getting going, but it's another perfect example of an area where they didn't know where we were in the room and we didn't know where they were in the room. And then when you get to the counties and understanding CCOs and how that intersects with public safety, and the huge disconnects all across the place. Yeah, that's a big area of improvement.
Any other questions, comments, concerns with this app? We have one more. Wheeler County.
All right. So Wheeler County is one of our $100,000 communities. They're requesting $77,000 for their programming.
I don't know what color they're.
Green.
Looks steady.
Zero all across. They haven't sent a property or recommended presented in the last 3 years. They're all zero.
So Wheeler, who's only 13, so these funds are
Last
paid
3
for.
years? Wow. That's from
I'm just trying to find mine real quick.
Beautiful fossil.
Sorry if I'm blocking the screen. Sorry, what was that? There's a card, and the receipt is somewhere in one of these bags. Yeah, sorry about that. Couldn't find a better time, so.
So you guys know you all have video and audio there, so.
All right, then, did you?
Okay. So, just went through my flow. 0.5 FTE is the ask for a community service supervisor. And what this person is going to do is help monitor and coordinate community service as ordered by the courts. That also, some of the funds go towards tools, a van, and trainings related to community service. And throughout the application, they really see community service as an alternative to custodial sanctions. And this program has been in operation for over a year. Wheeler County initially asked for, so this is going to be the exact same setup as Gillum. So everything we said about Gillum, this stands here for Wheeler. Now initially they asked for $20,000, so double what the minimum ask could be. And that is possibly going to change. They're still considering adding another $5,000 from their main program piece, which would turn that back into 72. And they're also considering splitting this up not only to community counseling solutions, but to Haven, which was mentioned in the Wasco slide, and is one of the providers, the victim service providers that serves Wheeler, Gillum, and Sherman. Did I miss anything on that? Took me to the last one, but I got it.
So there won't be anything less than 10,000 headed this way, but there could be more pulling from the Part 1 funds to make this happen. So we're still waiting on whatever that adjusted budget might be. But we as staff are comfortable with CCS, just like we are in the proposal with Gillum and Sherman. And so we're fine if they continue to work with this. Our victim panel hasn't seen a final approval here, so this is another one. It would be a recommendation from staff in terms of moving forward. But we'll outline all the budget pieces and make sure that works right.
And staff also approved the program piece.
Any questions, comments, concerns?
If you do, they'll hold up the food, so. Take that into account.
It all runs on that.
All right. Pass that down.
It's nice they put the names on this one.
Yeah.
Instead of just write the meals on top.
No, that's part of it.
It's in more at the end.
And I hope you know it's correct. So, we'll say that on all sides. Good.
Kelly.
I just want to make sure.
My guess was somebody somebody got a burger and they're expecting the pizza.
I should have had a pizza. They didn't bring mustard and mayonnaise, just
You were looking for a pizza?
no,
Mustard and mayonnaise, let me see if we got some.
no, I got a hamburger.
Oh, okay.
I'm looking for something that goes on with it.
We do have ketchup.
I said I probably made a mistake. I should have got it.
Oh, you should.
Yeah.
I don't know why they don't send
Yeah, it said
condiments.
dry- yeah, condiments, dried bread on a hamburger.
Yeah, that's right.
Except this don't work this time. They never have done that before.
They didn't put the names on it.
No,
It's getting better.
just have Ken do it more often.
You want some?
Yeah, I think that's what to me, that's the good.
Oh, yeah.
Somebody get what they're expecting.
Hey, Alex,
I know what you had.
can you shut our recorder down?
I just want to start this and get something else.
Chief, I think we're gonna be recessing for a little while now to eat lunch.
That's not what you wanted?
No, it is what I thought.
Okay, so I'll just go back and help myself.
Back around the corner there, Paul might have had to go across the street. Hey, Alex, did you have to go to work? On the audio record, you see the camera above the TV, it's not being visually recorded. As we eat and everything else, we already audio recorded for posterity, it'll be available on our website. So because I know that we're going to discuss the, specifically the domestic violence piece, and you're going to give us some guidance around that, I want to make sure that my staff and I completely understand what is expected of us. Procedurally, I just wanted to kind of let you know how this would work. If, for example, there was a county that you felt like a portion of their program maybe was not something that you would support, what that would mean. What that would mean is staff would go back to that county and say, Lane County, the grant review committee is not voted, they have voted not to support this program to our commissioners, because you all are an advisory committee that advise our CJC commissioners. At that point, we as staff would say, if you'd like to rehabilitate your application, knowing that, we'll work with you to do that. And that could mean that they just decide to take whatever money it is and reallocate it into a program that you already have supported, or maybe think of some other idea. Or they could choose to say, well, that's nice that the grant review committee doesn't feel that way, but we still feel strongly about that, and we want your commissioners to make that decision. But I just want to be clear that, and you probably all know this, but right now, we're just at the point where we would still work with the county. Our commissioners are meeting the 23rd, and it wouldn't be too late. The money wouldn't get lost or, be stricken from what they could apply for. We would work with them to get it back in their application. So that might not even come into effect here today, but I just want to procedurally kind of be explicit about how that would work. That makes sense? I think you all probably realize that. So,
My question is now that we're at the point where we need to approve,
Yep.
not approve, and whether or not we wanted to approve all of the applications on block, or before that, to go back and have any further discussion on Lane, and I'll yield to the good senator down there, or whether we approve them all in block.
I have no problem with in block. It just seems to me maybe we want to have some message to send back to all the counties as well as to the full commission as to our priority should be the 3194, and understanding there's this overlap and there's multiple arguments that can be made why getting into the DB, and I believe everyone said there's nothing against going there except for what the restrictions of this money is. So, Kiki, you had suggested some language earlier that you thought maybe that, I think the thing that caught my ear is a preference for Lane County. What does that mean as to, that could be defined in multiple ways. Does that mean that there actually will, in fact, take someone that isn't 3194 person first, and as compared to just looking at them, but at the same time they're not doing that. That's, I think, kind of where I'm at. Did you want to?
I think actually Tim was the one that provided the language to about that if they're doing everything they can with the 3194 population and expanding it to.
It seems to me if programs have looked at their numbers and looked at who's going to prison, what type of cases are handled, and then they have decided we're doing as much as we can with 3194 drug property, we think we can do more and use this money more expansively in this way. That makes sense to me. Obviously, the whole purpose of this grant was to give counties the opportunity to look at what they are doing and use it in the way that they think will have the best effect.
So the only other thing that Tim, you said something about this earlier as to maybe wanting to go back and look at others. Are we setting ourselves up for counties to come in and say, if I had known this, we might have done something different? Being just one round, and we can come back and, maybe have expansion. So I won't say this is a pilot, but it may be something that we can look at and see if under the framework that we have for this statute, whether we can allow for that more flexibility.
I don't know. I think that maybe further definition of flexibility for next round. I'm not sure, was there only one that had victim services that fell outside in the Part 1? And that was Lane County, or were there other ones that had it in their Part 1 funding?
Well, there are several that have a different Part 1 funding, but the Lane County domestic violence piece is not part of victims at all. It's completely separate from that.
Yeah, it's targeting misdemeanor and felony offenders.
Right.
No victim.
It's on the
piece
better
at
side.
all. It's all on the better side.
But there are other ones that have victims pieces within the programmatic piece, and we told them that was okay in the RFP.
Okay.
So the Lane 130 was the only holdover from all the Part 1 sections. But what we have recalled this morning, kind of the staff, is Lane also had something targeted towards sex offenders in their earlier submission that didn't make it through. So I mean, there's at least one part in one county's overall application that was looking outside of 3194 somewhat.
Is the expectation going to be that for the second year we're reapplying, or
No.
is there a way that counties maybe after they get through year one, you can come back and submit a modification saying, we have now done everything we can do with 3194, and we do want to expand it into domestic violence.
That's interesting. We had not thought about that. There's no reconvening of this committee at the halfway mark. You know, when there were conversations about if, you know, DOC has to open Deer Ridge and $9.5 million and it has to come out of CJC budget. Right now, reading the statute, it's vague. It's because I don't think anyone anticipated.
I think so that we don't get confused to separate the 3194 piece and the victim service, which are two different actual applications, really, because the victims was a special piece that was carved out during the session. And so that 10% to go to victim services was actually a lot of negotiation and a lot of work on the advocacy part to increase the funding for victim services. So that piece is not, in my estimation, looking at statute, is not tied to 31, to actually the whole issue of resolution 3194. So I think that clarity helps. But that which is part of 3190, the hard dollars, I'll call it the hard dollars, does tie to 3194. And not the miscellaneous.
So you brought up a point that I guess I didn't remember, but I do now, as to this 10% being dedicated. At least one county from going through this wall had no victim piece in there. Are we, I mean, should they have something in there? I mean, in the sense of what we're trying to do?
Yeah.
And Tim, you brought up something about having victim services. I mean, they got to have a county. I mean, it seems to me that, and that's, I know the 10% was really more for probably external from the victim services within the district attorney's office. At least I think it was more.
Well, it was more global. It was more neighbor or provider focused.
Right, nonprofit.
Nonprofit focused.
That was the intent.
Yeah. So I mean, from staff, when y'all report this, I mean, for me, I'm coming in here and hearing stuff. Is there something we should be doing here? I mean, should we be telling them they need to do 10%? Don't hold back. I mean,
Yeah, I mean, I think we have worked with them, and with Tiffany as well all years. Yeah, I mean, we've talked to them and tried to get them to do it, but if they're choosing not to apply for it, it's very strange that they would, you know, it's.
But let me ask this.
Yeah.
Can we find out in the county if there are services? I understand, from what I understand, if I remember correctly, that this may be, let's call it a turf war or just a personality issue. Can we vet that other group or that nonprofit, or if there's other nonprofits there? And can we dedicate or commit 10% of that to that organization?
Without going through that.
Without the county applying for it, but us directly choosing a victims provider where, in the absence of a local decision, we would make that decision.
I mean, it comes back to the intent. You know, also it's like.
And I'll go back to you for when we did the budget hearings, and not this session, but the previous session, around the state. The need for victim services was probably out of every county that we went to, that was high, one of the high issues on the list. And looking over the budgetary history, you know, we had not been so generous with victim services. So the advocacy groups have really, you know, made a case that there was a need to increase the funding and services for victims in various areas. And they presented their case, and both Wilson Williams and I, you know, put it through the past few years. The previous year, we increased the funding, and then we decided the budget process to add that language to statute. So that you would make a concerted effort in order to actually provide services to victims and their families. So.
Well, what I would offer is we talk to the author of the grant, who's the PO, but we could go back and talk to the LIPSIC chair and find out if the LIPSIC wants to do something different than what the PO wants to do the other day.
I was going to say, based on what Mike described, if we, let's say, reject it, you're going to reach out to you know, why don't y'all do that?
Yeah.
Reach out and
Yeah.
say, we as a group, if we agree, want something to be there and see if they can't work out that personnel conflict.
Yeah.
And if they can't do that, then I'm comfortable saying that that 10%, because what happens to that money? I mean, is it just
Sits in our.
just sits there? Yeah, and to me, I think we have an obligation to disperse that
Yeah.
to that, for that service.
Yeah, absolutely. I like that idea of our first stop, we'll go back to the lipstick and try to get them to come up with something. And then if the deadline comes and goes, we can discuss, you know, maybe our commissioners discuss. We could even open up our own RFP or something for $10,000 and ask for applications.
We know they have 4 options.
Yeah.
So we know the 4 options that they have. Just were those options explored in the last 2 days? We don't know.
That can even be part of our communications with the lipstick chair, is that we want you all to make a decision, but know that if you don't make a decision, that we will do our best to allocate these funds to that community on your behalf.
Yeah.
It's not ideal. Hopefully they'll figure it out, probably.
Yeah, we can do
That
that.
should be a message.
Yeah, hopefully figure it out.
Are we all in agreement to that?
Right?
In the block, I'm bringing Eagles Lane, because that was in the other. So with that, I will call for an motion to accept the recommendation of approval of the proposed grant applications in block, and that would be Baker, Benton, Clackamas, Clatsop, Columbia, Deschutes, Gilliam, Harney, Hood River, Jefferson, Lake, Lane, Malheur, Marion, Multnomah, Sherman, Tillamook, Umatilla, Union, Wallowa, Wasco, and Leader counties.
So moved with the understanding, with the directions we're giving to the commission to reach out to those counties that need to be talked to come in compliance with the other recommendations of this commission task force.
Any objection?
I would, just for the record, I suppose I should probably say I'm the chairman of the lip sync for North County, and I'll abstain from that portion of this.
Other than that,
You want to do?
Yeah, I suppose I should abstain from Multnomah County vote.
Or just declare.
declare just on that.
Fair conflict.
Potential conflict.
With the 2 abstention from Multnomah County and Wheeler County. Other than that,
Chief, you obviously are from Pendleton. Did you want to make a similar declaration or abstention from Umatilla's application?
Well, I certainly will, but I essentially remove myself from any discussions specific to that application. I didn't attend any of the meetings or participate knowing that I was going to be involved in this process.
Okay, thank you.
okay. With that, is there any objections? Hearing none. I think we can go forward and it's been approved.
All right, thank you. Our commissioners get together on the 23rd and we will forward your recommendation to them. That meeting is.
So specifically, we'd like your signature on all stuff.
Oh, sheesh.
Keep that hand on
Which one?
the front.
Two.
All right, I don't believe there's any other business.
And there's no more food.
No more food.
I was the one that did that. You got a date for me? What's today?
It's the 12th. 11/12.
No, it's 10/12.
Paul, do we need everybody's signature or just?
No, just the chair, whoever chaired today.
Great.
Representative Williamson signed it last time.
Got it. All right.
Thank you for
Thanks.
So it was the Senate, it's the Senate turn this time.
Thanks, Chief.
Thanks for the accommodation.
All right, take care.
So,
It's a lot for
some of them.
Communicate to our commissioners that I think it's the advice on what to handle.
Do you have everything copies? It's not really on mine. Would you give me?
The advice that everything should be used towards 3194.
Educate us.
Because I wrote on my copy, please go back and tell us. Yeah, who wants to sign?
Yeah, so,
Pam will be upset.
so they said, can we, want to go on all in one program and be more than the same?